We need to shift some things around the agenda, in order to allow for a quorum to arrive of commissioners before we do things that require voting. So I see that Dante is here. So if you're available to come and give a report in a minute, that would be great.
A minute's about all I need to have.
Okay, great. And while he's coming up, for everyone that's here, there's agenda items and other pieces of paper for your information up front, by the front door. And if you are interested in making a public comment, later on the agenda, there'll be time for that. And if you want to make a specific request of the commission, please go ahead and find the form for that and hand it to Kenya, who will be sitting there in a few minutes.
Thank you.
I don't know that I have a lot to address. So, obviously, for all the work we do, it's been a rough couple of weeks. Dealing with Ferguson in the aftermath. And if you haven't heard today, the grand jury in New York decided not to indict the officer who killed the young death on the street in New York. So, big picture of what the office has been doing in relation to maybe HRC, it's kind of budget season, so we've really been focusing on the budget. And so, HRC has done coming and with the awards next week, which goes ahead of time for the hard work that's been put into putting that on. It's always a wonderful event. I think I'm offering one of the awards to the AMA, I think. So that's a great event. That's kind of it. I don't know that I have anything else in particular as it relates to HRC. Questions of me or not? Just as an FYI, this afternoon at lunch, and then we will do the same thing next week at noon. We held an opportunity for citywide internal city employees, citywide discussion about Ferguson from the perspective of kind of looking at it systemically and what can we do as an institution, as a city, to begin to consider what some of the things that caused the tinderbox of Ferguson to explode, and how can Portland ensure that it's doing things differently, and just look at it systemically and just offer the opportunity for people who are trying to figure out how to have this conversation a place to do so. One of the interesting, just as an FYI, one of the interesting things that I asked them as I facilitated this, I'm thinking about next steps of how can people in the room do something to feel assistant. One of the questions that I asked was, how many of you in the room have had conversations about Ferguson in the last couple of weeks? And everybody raised their hand. I said, how many of you have had cross-cultural or multicultural conversations about Ferguson in the past 2 weeks? And about, out of 65 or 70 people, about 15 raised their hand, and the majority of those were black. And so clearly what I said was, we're all talking to us, but we're not talking to each other. And if we're going to deal with this in a better way, we better start talking to each other. So, just a point of information. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of it being budget season, does that mean that the office is proposing a certain budget? Is that how that goes?
We're in the beginning stages of doing that, yes. So by the first part of next year, we will have more specific budget numbers to be requested. It's called a stabilization budget, which means there's no new money, essentially. So the budget ask will pretty much be the same. And an announcement, I guess, is that as of yesterday, it's not official in terms of city bureaucracy process, but it's official. that the New Portlanders program, which was the program for refugees and immigrants that was housed in my office, is now no longer in my office. It is in the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. And so Polo Catalani, who was running that program, and the program itself is now in office. So to answer your question.
Joseph Wall was working on COAB stuff before,
Yeah.
and that's moved to Amy Luis, is that true? So I know Amy's coming on to do program management, isn't that?
Facilitating the selection process and
Okay.
outreach process.
Right, okay.
Right.
So is Joseph involved at all in that COAB work?
No. I mean, he's still there and engaged for information and whatever support we need to provide, but in terms of kind of project managing that.
So the question I have, you just brought up cross-cultural discussion of Ferguson. I know it's a part of what we all, I think at this table want and feel like this is hopefully we can be a catalyst to those things occurring. Is that with the generative work that we've talked about doing with the mayor, just around transparency, police accountability, things like that. I mean, they're all linked, they're different in their own ways, but there are a lot of the same conversations. I'm thinking, and I'm just, I guess, bringing it to the table with you here, is that something that we can look at doing? Is that some sort of action that we can look at setting up a conversation? And that's a lot, because I think it's a lot of one particular cultural background to have this conversation that just came out of one last night, and it was a big deal just for one group of people. But I think that just from an aspirational standpoint, I'd like to place that on the table, that if we can work towards or look at how much work would go into having a healthy cross-cultural discussion on something like that. What are the benefits that we could see here in Portland, and what does that look like if it were some sort of ongoing thing? Is it Donna, Derek,
Yeah,
the city?
there's-
There are methods, I guess there are ways that those things happen. I just think it would be great from an HRC perspective to look at, do we support another effort like that? Is that something we consider?
I'm going to throw in a spoiler. Donna Maxey is here to talk about an idea that we could get involved with doing that in regards to with race talks. She's actually, yeah, she's actually on the agenda for 4:35. But we might, since she's here, ask her to come on pretty soon. But that was a question to you.
What was the question to me?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it was, I think it just, you brought that up, and so I wanted to say it's one thing to hear it and to talk about it, I just want to make certain that we look at action after listening to that. And I know that these things are occurring and happening in pockets, but I'd like to see HRC be a part of supporting, sponsoring, making something happen. But really looking at what is the work that goes into this discussion being something that's a healthy, productive, generative conversation.
Yeah, and those are the key terms, that they're healthy and productive, and I mean, they're passionate conversations no matter what, but they can't devolve into, beat up on the police, or the decision was wrong and it's just about these two people, because it's not. It's a systemic question. And so how do you ensure that the framing maintains it as a question about systems, and what is the entire framework that built Ferguson to be what it was? And so, I mean, we had statistics of what is the, what is the makeup of it. 63% black. No members of the school board are black. One member of the board of the city's council is black. The percentage of cops is this. I mean, so that's the framework, at least in this tinderbox. But what are the other things, from school discipline and expulsion rates and all those things that make up the entire, I describe it as death by 1,000 cuts. And this was the 1,000th cut that was the final straw. And so how do you look at this systemically and have that conversation?
Well, I know there's a lot of different work. I just wanted to put it out there so we can. And Donna, you are spot on the timing.
Can I sit there now?
Are we?
Yeah,
there yet?
yeah, absolutely. And I think although we can't approve the agenda changes, I just want to let folks know that Lisa Graham, Deputy City Attorney, who's going to come speak to us about public meeting laws, cannot join us. So that opens up, as we were thinking, more time for conversation about this very topic.
Good afternoon, and as a person who for the first time sat back there, could y'all speak up? They can't hear you that well. It's nice to be sitting around the table again. We had a race talks, and I don't know if you saw, some of you saw the poster. I love that poster. Did you guys see that poster for race talks? It was Ferguson, Missouri, could Oregon be next? It shows a rear view mirror, and part of the face in it is a black kid looking in the rearview mirror, and if you look through the back window of the car, there's the police behind him. And that's really what it's kind of like and what happens around here. And so I invited the police to come and speak at that particular event, and Assistant Chief Krebs came and spoke. So what we talked about afterwards, one of the things that there are a lot of different ways about going to change people. One of the things that I think changes people is education and relationship, and that's what Race Talks is about. And so I was in discussions with Assistant Chief, can I just say Krebs and quit doing the Assistant Chief? But anyway, I was in discussion with Krebs about having Race Talks or something like that be a part of licensing for police, so that they get the opportunity. And Race Talks is a perfect venue because you have the discussion, you have the education, and you have the discussion. And I just happen to be a licensed teacher, licensed that I can teach adults and stuff, so I put it together with all that stuff in mind. So that being said, when Ferguson happened, I called him up and said, okay, we need to talk sooner, obviously. And what he and I came up with is that I think what would be great is to have a series of public forums where, starting in the African American community, and not just one in North and Northeast and Southeast, so every community, that and that these be real forums that are sit-down discussions, roundtable discussions. And I just happen to remember that I had helped HRC come up with a format for doing that for your community meetings, and I thought, since I've been putting my foot in your butt all these years about having community meetings, that this would be a great thing for you to be associated with. So you could be a co-sponsor and you could take credit for going out into the community and having these meetings. So you guys don't know anything about that, but I've been harping on that for the whole 6 years I was on the commission. So anyway, so what we talked about is that we would start in January with Race Talks. I have a Race Talks that's scheduled for them, and also I think it's in January that there's a new person, a diversity person that's been hired by the police department that's coming on, and that we would start it there at Jefferson, have childcare, food, and set it up so that it's roundtable discussions with a police officer, not the, I don't know what you call the ones that are like sergeant and above. Anyway, people who have, what do you call them?
Management. Well,
Yeah, thank you,
yeah.
management, okay. So have management at those tables, along with a person from the AMA, the Albino Ministerial Alliance, because AMA has been the front runner of doing this for a long, long time, for at least 30 years. And then have an HRC person at the table doing the note-taking. And after each one of these events, and have childcare and food, and after each one of these events, have a document that's drawn up from each particular community, saying these are the things that we think are important. And I know when we did that first community forum that we had little things at the table, what do you call those things?
The roundtable
Topics. Yeah.
Themes.
Yeah,
we did.
so people could go to a particular table if that's what they want to discuss, is this particular thing. So, so Krebs is very excited about the concept, and he's going to talk to the chief and get back to me this week I spoke to Reverend Bethel, who is the head of the AMA, and Reverend Haynes, who is the head of the, I guess,
Coalition for Justice. Their Coalition for Justice.
thank you. And so, and they both thought it was a great idea, and they want to do it.
So I love the idea. It's right on key with what we were talking about. I think you mentioned having 3 spots at each table in particular. I think if we could add a 4th, it would be key, and that would be a space for Black youth who are at least the age 35 and under. One of the conversations that have been occurring is that those that we see getting shot down are fortunately, they're not usually the folks who are sitting at AMA. They are young 15, 16, 12-year-old boys, and folks that just have a different feeling. And I think as we continue to have this conversation, if we can move forward in healthy conversation, it also includes Black youth who typically are those who are being gunned down, or those who, the names that we end up chanting.
Right.
So if we could have a spot, and there's a group that's emerging now in Portland that is kind of gathering around identity of being Black or Pan-African within that community, and also 35 and under. So I'd love to have a place that's specific for that, and that includes high school age kids as well. So yeah, I love the concept. I just love to add an additional space for someone.
Great. Well, and go ahead.
They're the groups, they're going by them. The name that they're going by is the Black Collective, and they're all about direct action organizing. So
I think it'd be good to have that conversation, because a lot of the community itself is feeling like there's one group who's at the table and maybe not, and if we're going to be a part of it, I'd love to just elevate it to the next
No,
level.
I agree. One of the things that was said when we did race talks in November was that what we had was 2 attorneys who had put together a phone app called Driving While Black. And I advise white folks to be sure, since everybody out here is white, I'm going to turn to you and tell you, come to these kinds of things and get the app, because once they get all the Black folks, you guys are next. So I like to remind people that this is not a, while it is a racial, ethnic issue, it's also an issue of a police mentality and a mentality, as I was speaking to Assistant Chief Krebs and telling him, if you look at Robin Hood and most of the stories, the bad guys are the sheriff. And they're the ones who are keeping the poor down to help protect the wealth of the wealthy. And that's something that, I'm sure police don't go into policing thinking that's what I'm going to do, but that's what it ends up being. So I just thought I'd put that out there and put it on his mind a little bit. So he's very excited about the idea, and when I spoke to O'Day, who's going to be the new chief, and briefly talked to him about it, and he sounded excited about the concept too. So this would be, I don't know how frequently you would want to do them, but this would be like a long-term thing. I would think at least one a month, maybe more frequently, but at least one a month, so that it goes into every ethnic community. And Southeast, where poor white people are too, because they're getting it too. Not as much as Blacks and Latinos and Lao, but they are getting it.
So I think it's a fabulous idea, very synchronistic to what we're up to. I'm just thinking about next steps. And one thought is that some of us work with you to get to concretize the agreement. What does that sponsorship mean? And just so we're clear, and that we, in language, and that's presented to the rest of HRC to see who's interested and what kind of capacity we have.
And I talked to Sam Sachs
Yeah.
about the CRC being a part of it too. I talked to Irene Konev about the IPR, what does that stand for?
Independent police review.
Independent Police Review, right. About the IPR being a part of it, but they are in the process of getting new membership, and they're not going to be ready until next year, probably February, March, something like that. So if we start in January, and then go throughout the year, then they will come on board too. So there will be more people to help with the process. But the other thing that I did mention is that rather than just have it be, I mean, I can start it out, plan it with race talks, but I think that we need to pull in other community organizations to sponsor, to be a major sponsor, so that if, for instance, what I'm suggesting is that we're gonna have it at Jefferson, so I have a person who comes to Jefferson and provides food, so I'm asking him to put together a estimate for food. And he's African-American, Dubs of St. John. But I think if we have it in an Asian community, then Apano would be a perfect sponsor, or some other Asian organization, and have them come up with a place to hold it and be a major sponsor, and also help to man those tables.
So can I ask, are you talking about like putting together essentially a toolkit so they can go and reproduce this type of thing? Or are you talking about it still being a Race Talks thing? If you would host, it would just be, how do we make it fit with you? Your particular, and I asked that question because I know Race Talks is your baby and you have done a fabulous job to the community, and I appreciate you and everything you've done with Race Talks. I wonder if there's a way, and I don't know, because it could be proprietary, but I mean, if there's a way to say like what you're doing, how do we pass that along? So, because maybe this could be happening like 10 times monthly in different places, right? Because not everybody ends up being able to make it to Jefferson on that day. I know I've been like, I can't believe I missed Donna's Race Talks, right? Like,
I know,
personally.
I haven't seen you there.
Right, I know.
I'm
So,
gonna say something about
I'm usually,
that.
I'm just kidding. So, but I think I think one thing that would be great is if we could come up with even like a mini toolkit that says, do you want to have your own discussion? Here are some things to think of. And
Okay, so
like,
I
can we-
understand, so let me
yeah.
stop you and tell you why I'm stopping. The concern that I have, and this was really interesting, is when, after the Jefferson race talks, the officer said to me, there were 3 of them there, what's his name, the North Precinct guy? No, I want to say Kukendall, but that's not his, Leloff. Mike Leloff. Mike Leloff, and then George Weatherroy and Krebs were all there. And they said to me afterwards, this went just like you said it was going to go. And then it was kind of this, I mean, you could see kind of like, you know, because a lot of times it turns into a screaming, hollering match and the police are the bad guys. And like and I don't have to be the person in charge at every one of those. It doesn't have to be a Race Talks event. But we need somebody who's in charge of it that's not taking any crap.
Yeah.
And sets the ground rules and is very clear about how it's going to go. Because I know when Race Talks we did our event about fluoride, there was some group from the county or something that called me up and asked me, how did I keep order? I said, what do you mean, how did I keep order? Well, we have people who are harassing the speakers and attacking them out at their cars and attacking them in the hall. I was like, oh, no, we don't do that.
So, and I'm sorry to take this conversation a little bit deeper, but I wonder if you know we can have an offsite or something where, because my thought is maybe it's about you and a few folks getting together and training and being almost a resource. I don't know if it's like the right. I mean, we cannot train someone to be Donna, and I know that, and I recognize
Donna
that.
has 40-something years of teaching.
Right, but yes, and I recognize that it requires you. Race Talks do require you, but I also recognize that there may be the capacity to.
Okay,
pass on
so
a
let
bit
me
of
stop
what-
you, and I'll say this. If we put together a format for how it's gonna go, and then if we had them I would be the moderator. I could do the moderation if I don't have to do all the planning and the intricacies of it. And of course, y'all gonna have to pay me some money, but I could do that. I mean, I'm trained to do this kind of stuff. I mean, I used to do it for a living. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with that, if I just don't have to do all the planning. But I mean, if we put together a packet, a standard packet of how it's supposed to go and what needs to be done and all that, then that would be cool. Because then you can just hand that off to another group, and they can do that.
Okay, well, and I think we can continue the conversation conversation, but I appreciate your candid, just open conversation, and you doing this.
What were you gonna say?
That part of the reason why it could be an educational event and could be educational for officers that are there is because of her teaching background too. So I think that's the piece that goes into it.
Yeah, I don't negate your capacity to do what you do well. That's why you're here.
Well, thank you. Okay, so,
And just to kind of tie this up, I am aware of the need to get agreements together about what is the relationship and what is it gonna look like? What of the design do we, if any, get involved with all of that? So, is anybody here interested in sitting down with Donna and fleshing that out? You wanna do that?
Yeah, I'm down, and if you want to, both of us can be in touch.
okay.
I think you should try to involve Sam too, since it is
Right.
a police piece and Krebs is a member of CPRC that, I think that would be another piece to pull in because they've got a strong connection with the officers and the folks that might actually, want to be involved with that.
And Krebs was, when I said I was gonna go to the HRC and talk to the CRC, he was like, wow, you're really gonna make this a big deal. I was like, yeah, I want this to be a big deal. And I talked about the possibility of setting a precedent and being a role model for the country. And I think that that's something that we should be looking at more than just, this is a little local thing, but we're setting a standard and setting, and something that could be duplicated other places as well. So,
Yeah, that's the strength.
I think as far as curriculum goes, the way you've talked about it right now is, with AMA and the police bureau folks, and I think the piece that Dante was talking about, and also something I've said around these issues, that systemic piece, that's not just the police bureau, but I think that's causing so much tension in the communities. It'd be nice to find a way to bring that piece into the curriculum too, in those discussions, so that it's not just, here's incident after incident of police activity, but what to me is what's causing part of that tension is how we got to this point, and even in our community, the history of the bus tour kind of stuff is very similar to the way Ferguson developed to some degree. And I think it'd be nice to bring that into the understanding about, why are communities so upset. So
and I
that's just-
think maybe since you're bringing up the bus tour, and this was something I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about too, is that, I don't know what kind of budget you guys have, but we need to be looking at doing that maybe annually
It'd be nice to,
instead of
yeah.
every 2 years.
Yeah, it is expensive, that's the only downside, but I agree, especially now to me, but, yeah.
I think
love
people
it.
are open for the discussion,
Yeah.
and
Because-
so I think it's something we can do. I think I have you guys' phone numbers, and so I'm starting to plan for next month already. So maybe, whether Krebs comes through with the money or not, if he's smart, he will. I put some stuff on his mind that I'm sure he's laid awake thinking about last night. And that whole piece about the role that the police play, and I'm sure you didn't plan to be like that as a child. But, that's something for folks to consider. So, I will be starting to plan on this already. So we need to, what's today, Wednesday? Okay, I want to talk to you before the end of the week. Yes, ma'am. So,
And Jefferson is which Tuesday?
first Tuesday, the
It's
6th.
first.
First Tuesday, the 6th. So we got to move on. And it's my birthday, so y'all bring money as a present. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Okay, so, on the question of Portland and response to Ferguson events, Sam, I think everybody would know that Sam initiated an action for a letter around it a couple of weeks ago, a week and a half ago. And Dayala was interested, I think you were interested, and Who else was showing up to be involved with that? Sonji. Sonji was as well. And in the end, we decided to have a conversation about that potential communication today. And I asked Diallo and Sam to put something together so we could have something to talk about at least.
Yeah, I
And
didn't get a chance to speak. I was gonna speak to him yesterday, but.
Okay. And Sam is with his sixth stepmom right now. So that's one, a reporting of what has happened so far on that. We can continue that conversation if there's energy right now. If you want to talk about perhaps what you think needs to happen, what you'd like to happen, because that's certainly something that can be still on the table as an action.
Right.
So are you on item number 7 on the agenda then? Are you jumping down to that?
No, because it never happened. It was just, I just thought to bring that up.
Oh, I'm sorry,
bring
that's the
that
other,
up
that's the other
now
letter.
In terms of, it fits in with the topic of conversation, so I just thought it was just something right now.
Well, I mean, I have the letter that I edited here, it's sent it back. But as far as the discussion, I think that me and Sam probably should talk more about it before presenting it.
And hopefully somebody's
Yeah.
still available to listen. Okay.
Yeah, she was supposed to be here today.
Yeah, well, yes.
But maybe one way to talk about it right now, if folks are interested, is to maybe talk a little bit about what the letter says. I don't get to read it, but kind of what the tenor of the letter is and what what we're saying about it. So that folks have, around this table have
Right.
comments.
So Sam initiated the letter, and he, in the letter, spoke about police and race relations, and the fact that Portland is organizing with groups like the Portland Police, AMA, and members of the faith-based community. And he ends the letter talking about the city and the CPRC trying to implement an equity plan, possibly, and also that what's going to happen at the next CPRC meeting, which is, I think he said, Honorable Paul DeMunis will attend the CPRC meeting. When I responded, I responded to also include use of force into the letter, as well as to elaborate on the DOJ and how that relates to Portland. I also said to add in some other things that the commission was doing around this issue, including working with the city on getting members for the newly forming Community Oversight Advocacy Board called COAB, and also our committee, Committee on Law Enforcement and Police Review. I also said to maybe include that the community is asking for justice, the community is asking for a focus on things like use of force and the role of law enforcement and authorities, but also people want to start having conversations around this justice system that we have in general. And so we need to be aware of what the community is talking about and asking for when we write these letters. So that was a conversation that we need to still continue, that kind of an overview.
Yeah, a lot of pieces. Hi, Sonji. As you hear, we're jumping right into the in-process letter around Ferguson response demonstrations. I don't want to put you on the spot before you really landed, but Dale just kind of outlined, and I think you've read the letter, he just outlined themes from that letter, and I wonder if you wanted to add anything to that.
I think that should suffice. I think, I responded back and agreed with what you had included. My concern was, I didn't want to utilize that letter to necessarily applaud the police following the protests on Saturday. And that's what I simply wanted to make sure that we did not use that letter to do that. So I trust that that's what you know, what you just shared is what will be included.
One thought that I had, I support the letter generally, would probably have some input specifically. But I read Mayor Hale's communication about after the recent protest, well, the one that's under, where their use of force is under some scrutiny right now. And he very clearly outlined the reasons why the police went into that action to protect people's right of way on the highway, to make people safe, preventing people from going on the highway, those kinds of actions. And what I'm contemplating is the premise of some of that as a question of, yes, all that's true, and how much is the police bureau leadership acknowledging that we have, this is a very important moment. It feels like a very crucial tipping point. And is that being honored as the situation or the reasons for moving forward with that kind of use of force as well? So, you know, I don't have it all fleshed out in my head, but something to that effect I'd want to look into in the letter as well.
So I think that's a great theme to ask where police officers' heads are at, but I also don't think that there's anything that's actionable to hold someone accountable to. It's one thing to say, are you thinking about this? Are you just recognizing this? It's another thing to say, how does that affect your action? And so I think whatever this letter does, especially not applauding the police at this point, and I was right before that all occurred, sitting there talking with this assistant, now Chief O'Day, about the fact that keeping everyone safe is the goal. And so, I mean, and I think the recognition of what that moment was not a void at that point. I think it's about how do we make certain that actions can be that there's actually something behind that. It's one thing to say, put this in your mind and walk in this recognition. It's another thing to say, because of that, or just because generally someone's a human and we're sitting here talking about human rights, there are things that you should and should not do, and there are things that we need to talk about and how do we change the policy. And I recognize that this letter is not going to change policy, but I think we need to be talking about what are the action items, what are the buttons we need to start pushing to actually move something further, and it has to include where are people's heads, but unfortunately, what we've recognized is no matter if you have a badge or not or whatever it is, your head can be somewhere, and that's, I don't know, I just think we need to also talk about what are the actions that we can urge now, what are the things that we can ask for change so that this doesn't happen at the next rally. I mean, you know.
No, that makes sense. Yes.
Sorry, hi, Kenya.
Hey. I agree with what you're saying, Shabri. I think that part of getting there is including in this letter the human rights violations.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the pieces of human rights that were violated? And then we can start to look at the human right piece and then changing the policies to match what is a human right.
I think, yes, I think it's lining it up with because one of the things that, the discussion I had last night was, one of the things that we recognize is that all of these things that are occurring within the law. The law itself is broken. And so we need to change the law, but we need to take this universal human right and say whichever we're gonna call out is directly,
And I called them out in my email.
Yes, you did. So we need to
we
specify
can use
those
what
and talk about practice and action right now that cops or people or whoever they're acting in. This is not them acting out of it. And we've seen time after time these non-indictments are because they're acting within a broken system. We need to highlight those things and talk about moving the bar, moving the needle on these things. And I think if that's what this letter does, including saying where the heck is your head, do you recognize what's occurring in people's lives right now? Like those, I think it's all a part of the mix. And I don't know what that all is, but I know thank you for highlighting the two pieces, and then maybe it's about pulling the pieces of law that are around that seem to contradict or they seem to act within, saying that it is okay, like stand your ground or the things that we're talking, that's the Ferguson thing, but you know what I'm saying? Like what are the actual laws that we can help move?
So I think that maybe to kind of dovetail, having these articles is important for us because it gives our purpose in a way, and
That's where you
yeah, and this is, I think, a problem across the board. A lot of people, they go into next steps, they go into how are we gonna structure this, what are we gonna do, without first addressing their purpose and their vision. And it's actually, I watched this in a TED Talk talking about like a natural process of planning. And we have to have our purpose really clear among each other, and that's why I think that the conversation between Sam and I needs to happen so that we can agree on our purpose. And then move to our vision, start generating ideas that can be implemented and create a structure, prioritize before we can move to next steps. And so this is just how I'm seeing the process in my own mind, and I'm ready.
I think we should be careful, I don't know, careful being the wrong word, but I think if I'm remembering correctly from Sam's draft of the letter, I actually think, I'm certain that I would use the word applauds the police effort, but I think he acknowledges that, that there was an effort made by the police and members of the community for it to be a peaceful assembly. I'm kind of thinking that's what his words were about. You've got the letter in front of you.
Well,
And so-
there's two versions of the assemblies. There was a permitted
That's right.
assembly, and then there was been a lot of actions afterwards, and it's the actions afterwards that are under scrutiny, well, the police actions around those
Right.
other
So I
actions
think
are under
we have to,
scrutiny.
yeah, we may need to make some distinctions
Yeah.
there, and be clear about which actions we're talking about, which groups we're talking about.
That's a good point.
Because I actually think in Sam's letter, and if I know Sam, I think that that is part of his intent, is to say, is to offer some praise to the police for the way they've handled working with the community to try to make it a peaceful process, which is what, to some degree, most of the community asked for. There's a segment of the community that feels differently, and I think that's what's happening. So I think we need to be clear about what we support and what we don't.
Yeah, and so I think that just based on the letter that Sam sent, that the community is asking for much more. I didn't think that the community was asking specifically what he was mentioning. And I don't want it to come off, and I said to him that I didn't want it to come off as if we're not listening to the community, because there's another example that's really similar, and it's that picture that went viral of a kid hugging a police officer. And it was kind of in a way applauding the police, even though, not necessarily that way, but people saw it as, oh, there's good things happening. Portland is doing, yeah, their police are friendly to people. But then we found out that that picture was staged. And a lot of people said that, oh yeah, I didn't share it in the first place because I know that we shouldn't be focusing on, oh, how good they're doing. We need to focus on the issues and the salience and gravity of the situation so that we can actually fix it, not just try to immediately go toward applauding the police. And so I think that we need to continue listening to the community, even with that aspect, that before we do anything to try to say what's going wrong, we need to make sure we know the purpose of what's wrong and why we're in this competition in the first place.
And I only bring that up because it's going to come up later when we talk about communications. It's how do we reconcile the opinions of 15 people when one person might have a different opinion? And if that's the person that started the letter, are 14 people going to edit it? So what is the process for doing that?
So I think that's actually coming up in the communications piece that we're going to talk about. And I think one of the things that just to add to that we want to do, and I don't think our job, I don't think when I signed on or swore to be a commissioner, my goal was not to celebrate the police for doing their job. And doing their job would be, had that not been staged, good relationships with the community that were meant to be policing. And they have their own PR department, and they have their own folks who can make things look great, and they have whatever. And while successes around relationships and a committee such as CPRC, like that in itself is highlighting and specifying the greatness of having relationships. And I don't know how much more we need to do, and there's so much more work that needs to happen on the other side. And so, and I'm not saying that I'm not gonna sit out there and tell Larry every day that he's horrible, and let me tell you the ways, without also saying, but I recognize that you two are human, and you two have, you know, your things that you're working through, like all of us do. But that's not what the HRC is here to do right now. And it's meant to move forward some action. So I think that that's a larger conversation around how do we do these things, because we're not, you know, we're not, and I talked when we sat down with Charlie, I told him my goal here is not to tell everyone that you have made all of this happen, because it's not all on Charlie's shoulders. He's simply the one right now who has the capacity or the power to make some change. Same thing with Chief O'Day. And so what do we hold their feet to the fire on about now? That's what we're here for. And if we can do some kumbaya some other time or in some other, you know, I think that's okay. But we are human, so it's not all about like hard pressed, crazy all times, but it's just recognizing the limited time that we do have here and recognizing that CPRC does a lot of that, I think, like that's inherent in what CPRC is. I know I'm a new commissioner, but I think that that's what it's meant to be, so.
And frankly, I think if you read the mission of the commission overall, it's what the commission's meant to do. I don't think the mission of our commission says that we are a community advocacy group solely. The mission of the commission is actually bridging those groups that have differences. And so if we're talking about the community, the police bureau, then part of our action is bridging that.
And the CPRC is exactly like that's the action of that, and it's building peace, ending discrimination, and so that there's both at the same time, like they're both important. So
anyway,
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how long they're taking.
Well, it's just such an important topic. I checked in with Amy, who has some flexibility, but does need to get to her son pretty soon. Did you want to say one last thing? Yeah.
It'll be small. I think that we were talking about what the community wants, but we have not institutionalized amongst ourselves a way to capture the community's interest. I think that currently we're talking about what we hear from our own personal networks in terms of the community. And I think that if we're going to be taken seriously, and we're going to be able to have the impact that we hope to have, we need to first have a formal way to capture the community's interest. And I think that what we're talking about for Donna might be one of those avenues, or maybe something like that. But I think maybe even in terms of the letter, I don't know if it's wise to add in what we think that the community wants, because we have not talked to the community about it outside of a personal note.
So I hear you. I would rebut a bit. We are the community. We are volunteer community members, and we were selected because we are connected to many of these different pieces. So we bring about, just based upon our presence here, Alan, you have a part that I don't have. Sonja, you bring something that I don't bring, but we bring it all together, and they're at the table. And I think one of the questions I first had when I was here was, why in the heck are there 15 of us? And then sitting around getting the different perspectives from everybody, I was like, oh, that's why. So it's not just my thought. It's not just Sabrina and what she thinks. It's Alan, it's Sam with his differing perspectives. All of those are a part of it. So I don't want to negate the fact that we here as volunteers bring that. And there should also be on top of that a layer of a formal layer of how do we ensure that we're hearing what the community wants. Like I feel like it's a dual piece. Because otherwise, what the heck are we doing?
Well,
Or let's get paid for it, like one of the two, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
it's definitely different.
When you take on your commission, if you can imagine, that's another hat that maybe goes over the top of your community member hat. And so when you're a body, you're not the community. You're the HRC, I have to think about which commission you are. You're the HRC. And so I think that as a body, it's important to also, like you said, get the community's interest, will, and want in a formal way. Even though every day you all get to be community, I would say except for when you sit here. And when you sit here, you put on your HRC hat.
So I would propose that when we know, and most of us, because we're community members, we know what's going on, we have our finger to some degree on the pulse of what's going on. We all have in some way been following what's going on in our own community, Ferguson, abroad.
on multiple issues,
On
not just
multiple
Ferguson,
issues.
not just Ferguson, right?
But when those things are at the forefront and they're at a boiling point, I think it's our responsibility to, like Kenya said, give the community this forum, rather than us governing ourselves to talk about how do we operate. This should be the forum in which the community comes up here and says, we want to talk about this. I think we have beat ourselves up prior to you joining, we've really beat ourselves up with trying to govern ourselves to be presentable to the city. Whereas we've lost the voice of the community in the process of trying to do that. So I would propose that, and if I have to do something formal to propose it, I will. But when things like this happen, you know, the folks who felt as though their voices weren't being heard on Saturday night, this is the forum for them to be here to let us know, so that we can by way take that message, as you mentioned, Alan, to bridge that understanding. Because if they don't have a space in this room, Kenya's right, we are part of the community. And if they're not choosing to come to this room as one of the places where they feel as though their voices are going to be heard, we are doing a disservice to them as a commission.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And it's formal, it's in there. We got at least that layer of it.
It's interesting what somebody just said, kind of overrides what I was thinking, but at the same time, what I was thinking still fits, and I probably should say it, is that I come to this setting with an HRC hat and my community hat on at the same time. And the same when I'm in my community, like I have my community hat on all the time, but I'm also keeping that lens of a commissioner. Like I can't get rid of them both. I can't get rid of one or the other. They're always going to be in me at the same time. And so I don't feel like we even have that choice. It's a natural thing that's already happening. And so
I think it has to go back to what is our objective in writing the letter, and we need to be clear about what voice we're using. Are we saying, you know, as a city-appointed commission who has this duty to advise city council, is that what we're doing? Are we advising the city at this point, or are we saying we're a set of community members who are potentially more that we feel like here's what we're hearing from the community and we're lifting it up? So I think we need to make sure we know what voice we're using and what we're publicly communicating. You know,
And
I
there's
think it
nothing,
gets confused.
right, and there's nothing to say that we can't make a clear communication that does both.
That does both, right? Exactly. But I think we need to be clear about how we came to the conclusions or the opinions we have in there. Is it because we went out and surveyed and gathered 100 people in a forum, or is it because you know, this is the type of stance that we advocate for? So make sure we know how we're communicating this.
Okay, we need to move on, I'm afraid. But in terms of moving this forward, before y'all go, as we don't know how long Sam's going to be away, so I'm wondering if we should suggest that somebody else pick up the action lead for this. Anybody, and then I would just check in with them to see if that's okay, and I can be still available to help move it forward.
I can do it.
Okay, great. So I'll send Sam an email asking if he minds, and if he can still be involved, but he would lead that.
I'll keep everybody involved, guys.
Okay.
We keep fewer than 6 people involved.
Yeah. So we're gonna,
Same.
Dale's gonna pick up the action with Sam, if that's okay with Sam. Okay.
So what is the process for getting is there a letter going to go out before?
Who are the team continuing it forward? The other folks have had a chance to weigh in their interest, and it hasn't happened. Okay.
And in terms of public meeting law, we can have 6, 7, 8, 10 people on the email thread as long as we don't make any decisions. If we're just looking at information and responding to information, but if you make any decision like, yeah, I like that, let's go with that, then we violated the law.
Which
Pretty much what that email is about.
Yeah,
So
I think that's pretty much decision-making along the way.
But the piece
yeah.
where people get to see what's being, different iterations or different drafts, that's fine. Just
What you can do is, if you wanted to do that, you could send can send it to the entire commission and ask them to respond only. So you can do that. You just can't converse as a group. We just can't converse as a group. So you
I
can
thought
do
we
that.
can't make decisions as a group, but we
Right.
can converse.
No,
Okay,
because
yeah.
conversing is decision.
Right, if there's anything leading up to a decision.
Right. But if you wanted to send it out to everybody, as long as folks weren't replying to all and having discussions, you could. But you could ask everybody to respond if you want to. I don't know if they want to need to.
Just don't respond out.
Don't respond at all.
So I have a question, just for clarification, I know we need to move forward. Has that always been a role with the commission?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And, not Amy, but,
Even
Lisa
before-
Graham is gonna come talk to us and clarify that for us today, but she's at City Hall right now, is that I've made a request for anybody on the commission to let me know if they were interested. Kate Laura at one point was interested, and she's since left us as a commissioner. And Sam expressed interest but needed more information. So period. Second step of that, with the PCOD HRC joint appointments, Joe Vanderveer and I, the chair of PCOD, have been working on an application. And originally, we thought that that application would be just ours, perhaps, and that we would do our own, through OHR, our own recruiting. But what then happened was there was an initiative for there to be a centralized process, including a common application. So where we're at now is that we are using a common application. There is going to be a centralized person who's working on the recruiting, and you're going to be receiving the applications.
That piece is TBD right now.
Okay,
It's
great.
Joe Wall is listed as the recipient. We need to figure out.
Yeah, no, I think that's not going to happen. So anyway, I'm hoping that helped catch up HRC with where we are with that. It was a little bit of a review. So there's deadlines that have been shifted recently. And then I think mostly anything that I haven't covered for folks, you can help with questions.
Great. So my name is Amy Ruiz. I have worked for the city in the past, I worked in the mayor's office, and then most recently worked on the Parks Bond campaign, so I have experience in communications, and frankly, the city's kind of looking at this outreach for the COAB process as almost a mini campaign of really wanting to get the word out so we get a great pool of applicants. So I've been brought in short term to help with the selection process, but most specifically with the outreach process. We have a new set of deadlines with the COAB selection, driven by a conversation with the Department of Justice. Things shifted up a little bit to ensure that the COAB is seated by the beginning of February, which will allow them to do their community outreach in March and inform the first quarterly report that they will be in existence for, which is April 1st. So there's already a quarterly report calendar of when the city's information goes to DOJ, and there's an April report, and the DOJ would very much like the COAB's input to be a part of that. So we are on a quick timeline. The next steps in the COAB selection process, the planning committee, of which two of your members are a part of that, is convening tomorrow night. I hope you'll both be able to join. We will be finalizing the application at that meeting tomorrow night. We'll also be looking at the draft outreach plan that I'll bring to that group, which is really two parts. One part is what groups in the community are meeting in December and early January, where we could potentially go request a few minutes, not unlike what I'm doing here, to let them know what the COAB is, what the settlement agreement is, and what the COAB's role is, and how they can apply. We anticipate with scheduling, there'll probably be about a dozen groups or so that will be able to attend. And we'll be training the planning committee tomorrow night on how to give that presentation in the hopes that some of them will be able to volunteer a few minutes here and there to help us with that outreach. Second part of the outreach is the broader outreach, so putting together a very lengthy list of community organizations, everybody from mental health providers to groups in communities of color, neighborhood associations, you name it. If it's a group in town who might be willing to share this information with their networks, we want to get the information to them. So I'll be sharing that list as well with the planning committee tomorrow and looking for additional input into who we don't have. So then we'll be asking those groups, here's the application, here's a some background information that's easily digestible, shorter on the acronyms, longer on the true role of this group, and can you get that out to your networks. The application will also be featuring the media to make sure we can have broader outreach on it, and then using the mayor's office website, hopefully OHR's website, Commissioner Frost's website. Basically, any channels we can find to get this information out, that's what we're trying to do in the next few weeks. Applications should be live Friday or Monday, pending to our next conversation. And then they will be due on January 16th, which is a Friday. That's where things start to get really quick. So when we compress the timeline, we wanted to keep the application open as long as possible. So we accelerated on the back end to have the committee seated by early February. So applications will come in on Friday. That's when, and then on Monday, Amy and Joe will need to go over those applications to choose your 3 designees from PCOD and HRC. That's Tuesday the 20th. Wednesday the 21st is when the selection committee, which is a group currently of about 20 stakeholder organizations that will send a representative. The planning committee drafted a list of those representatives. They will choose the 5 at-large members at an open public meeting. There won't be an opportunity for public input, but there will be an opportunity for the public to observe the proceedings. Then the next day, the city council, who gets to choose the last 5 members, they should choose one, will choose from whoever remains of the applicants. So people have to apply to be considered. All of the members will be chosen from the pool of applicants from all of the different bodies. Then the council will likely vote to affirm that group the following week. So we will be making sure that, because the timeline is so quick at the end, that folks who are applying are well aware as they're applying that the training is probably going to be on February 2nd and the first meeting is likely to be on February 9th. So we don't want people to hear you've been appointed on January 28th and we need you 4 days. So we want people to mark their calendars early, that those dates are going to happen really fast after the selection is finalized. Then that's the end of my formal involvement, but I can outline what happens next with the group. Tentatively, the COAB will be trained in early February, have the first meeting in February 9th. Those first meetings will be about the COAB really setting their own bylaws. Justice Palminos will be chairing that group, but they really need to set up, what does our meeting structure look like? How often are we meeting? How do we make decisions as a group? The city hasn't put those in place in advance because they really want this group to inform those decisions. Then roughly February 16th will be the first of the public hearings where the COAB will gather the public input and how the settlement implementation has been going to inform that first quarterly report on April 1st.
Are you looking at a timeline right now?
I will have that timeline in a handoutable version.
Okay.
That's part of what we'll be approving at the planning committee tomorrow night. You guys are going to get a sneak peek here tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, there'll be
trying
the
to capture all
application,
these
and then there'll be a
dates.
flyer with, here's what this is, and on the back, here's the timeline.
Perfect.
There's one piece I wanted to clarify. You mentioned that at a certain point, city council will affirm the group. And there's a piece about, for me, my understanding from reading the agreement is that they really are only going to affirm their partners, their people.
That was, we had a bit of a conversation about this, and there was a phone call that you were on, where the city needs to double check whether they, because it's a group, depending on who they're advising, does the council need to approve them for them to be an official body, or not? And I think there's different perspectives on they should be very autonomous versus it's important that they have the vote, which then makes the public records and open meetings things more official. So we'll get the answer to that soon too.
Yeah, and from what because I was on a call, that it was interesting to hear a DOJ attorney indicate, well, it actually might be more of an endorsement for city council to approve that appointment from HRC or PCOD. And I'm not an attorney, so I don't understand the legalities of it. Because for me, my orientation is always, we're an independent body as much as possible. That endorsement from city council is not going to be necessary. So I think it'll be important for us to hear the details about that.
And that's where the city attorney needs to untangle. They're giving a report to DOJ, but are they also advising the city? And if they're advising the city, do they need to be officially created by the city, essentially, is the question. It is a technicality. With broader, yeah.
So I have a question, I think it's probably internal to us. So applications are due on the 16th, and then HRC will be making its selections on the 20th? So
That's
what-
the other thing I wanted to bring up.
Okay, the process for that?
We originally set an application deadline of January 9th, but actually had the decision-making happening the next week anyway, so it's still very short, but we compressed it further to get more applications.
Well, actually, let me back up. One is, so what about the HRC member appointee? Is that a different time frame or the same?
Well, the timeframe is, for that is totally
Separate.
out of the water at
It's not
this point.
application.
It is whenever we can make it happen.
Yeah. Okay. So my concern around that, if the applications are due on the 16th, and maybe you're going to address this, and the decision is made on the 20th, are you not interviewing people, or what are your thoughts about how you will evaluate, not necessarily you, but how those people will be evaluated, and what's the plan for that?
That's a really good question. There has not been room made to really do interviews.
And right now, it's just the selection committee that we're talking, that you specified. And is it a selection committee? The
Well,
group who's
you
listening
just
to
said
who's
Joe and
taking-
Amy, I mean, it says, the
Right.
written part says that they'll be selected by the HRC 5 chairs. That
I'm not
doesn't-
talking about those people, I'm talking about the whole.
Oh, I'm talking
Johnny
about-
will
He's just
choose
talking
the
about
next
this,
three
right
after
now.
the two commission representatives, and then the selection committee, which
Choose
the
the
list
five
was
as part.
brainstormed before, will choose the next five.
Five, yes,
From
the
the
five
applications.
is what I'm.
So I'm talking about the three.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because that's the ones that HRC and DCON are responsible for.
Right.
And so, at this point, again, I know it says HRC chair and DCON chair, but it really means that it could be a work group that makes a recommendation and be at a point.
And that's what the request was when we talked about this in January. That as the chair, I opened that up to a team of the HRC to help create that appointment, and I'm entirely open to that. And the timing for that, so in order for that to happen, the folks would have to be available on the 20th to help us look through those applications. And there's no room for interviews.
Right.
So the application is designed to ask more qualitative questions, so you're getting hopefully a good snapshot of who the applicant is, their interests and their qualifications, their lived experience in mental issues.
So what's happening is we are, just real quick, so what's happening with this schedule is things are crunched in order to allow for the COAB to gather community input before their required first report. And unfortunately, we're behind the 8 ball on that. So I would love to see if there's a way to creatively involve as many people, but I'm not seeing it. If anything amazing comes to your head, I really welcome it.
Yeah, because the 16th is a Friday,
Yeah.
and the 20th is a Tuesday.
Right, so it means.
We will get the applications turned around and out to all of the groups right away, ideally late that Friday, if not that first thing Saturday, so that as much as possible to.
So that's what the steering committee is working on, right, this process? They'll talk about that
The
tomorrow.
planning committee.
Planning committee.
Yep.
Because to me, I mean, selecting the COAB members, so the actual selection of the members seems really important.
Which is the whole reason for these meetings that we've been attending, and the unfortunate thing is the meeting that we attended first, which was originally set to be like the only meeting that was going to happen, we walked out of that meeting with the understanding that we wouldn't even be asking about applications until like January, and that process would go through January. And so this rapid acceleration happened in between that meeting and when you called me. I don't even know when it was last week.
Yeah,
And
no, the
so-
city had a proposed timeline that was longer.
Right.
And then the DOJ weighed in to say it needed to be faster.
So that they could comply with the settlement agreement. That's essentially what's happening. But I guess I'm concerned that the compression of such an important piece is compromised. That, and we're talking about three people out of that
We
group of 15.
bring in a total of 5, it's significant.
Yeah. So
Well-
I just want to bring that forward. I'm not sure I have an answer for it, but it's,
The
to me,
three that you
it's,
select will be from a subset of the applications, because it'll be the folks who are the qualified mental health care providers or from people with lived experience.
Right.
Which may not be the entire applicant pool.
Right.
but it's, the COAB is, voting members is
15 voting members
voting
and
members.
5 non-voting.
So we're involved in appointing a third of the COAB. And
And
3 out of the 15 will be selected in a period of 4 days, 2 of which are weekly.
Right, exactly. And the way I would do it if we have to stick to this schedule is to make myself available for Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, and whatever works out for most people, we would do it then. Can you remind us, or me, why the DOJ was interested in the deadline that we're working at, sorry?
The acceleration.
Yeah.
It's to meet the April 1st report deadline to DOJ.
And why is that deadline important? Why couldn't that deadline be pushed back?
Because it lines up with there's already been quarterly reporting happening on the city's behalf, so the police are assembling data quarterly, adding a report to that and getting it to the DOJ. This will be a part of that quarterly report, and that quarterly report calendar has been set for a while. It's already been utilized. So they didn't want to wait until the next quarterly report, which would be another 3 months before there's community input into the implementation of the settlement.
So the application is going to be, the application is going to be live this week, which is going to be like the 8th,
Hopefully Friday at the latest on
the
Monday.
5th or the 8th. And so couldn't you move the application down, just make it 1 month from today? You think 4 weeks? Do you think that 1 week would make a difference? Could you make the applications due on the 7th?
That was part of the
Or even the
negotiation.
13th?
That was part of the negotiation. First, it was a week earlier, and we asked for more time. So we could ask for a week earlier to give room for interviews,
Yeah.
for final interviews.
I think interviews are important to me.
I didn't even consider it, to be perfectly honest.
I mean, because when you compare that process for selecting 3 people with the process that is going to be used to select the 5 at-large people, there's a marked difference, right? I mean, there's a huge process for selecting 5 at-large people. The 3 people that are going to be selected by HRC and PCOD, they have different skill set potentially, but they're nonetheless important to
Right.
any of the 15 members on the board.
2 things that I can't make that decision, but if the 2 of you would raise that on behalf of the HRC at tomorrow's meeting for discussion, that would be really useful. And if that planning committee comes to consensus on that, the city would need to have that conversation with the DOJ, I think, to get that agreement, but that seems like something that would be workable, because they're most concerned about the April 1st deadline. That said, 2 of the reasons we pushed the application deadline a little further was because of the holidays and how much outreach time
And the
we
outreach
lose.
to go to the groups.
Right, and to that point, I think it's important for a lot of the groups that we're meeting with, this group in particular, to be helping with outreach so that we know that there are great candidates in that pool. You know, if there's somebody who you think would be an excellent COAB member, make sure that they know that they're applying. And that name will
Yeah, it won't be
pop
just,
up.
it'll open on Monday and everybody, well, you'll be doing outreach between now and that date. And do you know from your schedule of groups that you're meeting with, are there some that you're meeting with in early or second week of January?
Have not scheduled any of those consecutive.
But it's
dates.
likely
Yes.
since we're already, right, just like us.
It does
their
allow
next meeting would be-
us to capture almost any group that
Yeah.
has a monthly meeting.
Yeah, monthly meeting, exactly right. That would be the second week of January. Would be interesting. And Amy, you mentioned negotiation. Is that the DOJ? So DOJ is the one that set that schedule then? You talked about negotiation on the dates.
Yeah, they're giving input, they're flexible, but they're, in some regards, in my impression, but the outline, the timeline that Amy just outlined in terms of getting ready to do reporting, they're more rigid on.
Sure, oh, no, that's fine. And this wouldn't impact that necessarily,
Right.
because you're still selecting on the 20th. I'm just saying that, to me, that's an important decision that I'm sure should be made in 4 days. That's just me. And I'm probably not going to participate in that selection.
So what do you guys think, those of you, Shabri and Dale, you guys are moving into this meeting tomorrow?
I think more time makes sense. I mean, I think this rapid, like, accelerated thing is incredibly unfortunate, and it's as much time as possible is the best thing. because I recognize that there's this quarterly report, but if reporting's been happening before, and we're talking about selecting a group of people that are supposed to now hold all of this, and we're, we've been doing reporting without it before, and I mean, if we can't push the report any further, then we need to push as far back as we can. And it was already, the idea of it happening in January already felt like, okay, that's coming up pretty rapid because the holidays are gonna come and go, and it's gonna be like a blink of the eye, and it's gonna be done. And many people aren't even aware of it. And so, and I also feel like this reliance on what are the community meetings we can get out to, there are decreased meetings that are occurring right now because of the holidays. And so, and to put it on the community saying, you guys need to have these meetings so we can come to you to tell you about it is just like a backwards way of doing it. And I'm not saying that to you, because I just got put into this to do this, but it just, when I got your call, I was half like, what? And I didn't want to hang up on you because you're nice, but and it's not your fault, but I was just like, this doesn't make any sense, and you're pushing it now back to the community to be held responsible for doing something that it just doesn't, it feels weird to me. And so that's why I've kind of been quiet listening and hearing what are the solution-based ways to look at it versus just to be, adverse to it. So as much time, and I guess I got a little bit lost in that conversation. Are we asking for a week pushback or what? Like, what is it?
Well, any days you can't, it seems to be any
One day
days.
you want to make time for interviews, though.
Well, the other thing we haven't actually talked about, what is the actual process that's gonna be used to select those 3 people? I mean, if you and Joe are gonna sit in a room and look at the applications, you might not need interviews. But even, do you feel like you would want to interview people if just you and Joe were gonna select?
Certainly.
Yeah, I would too, I mean.
If that was available.
Yeah.
So yeah, the HRC, I'm not too worried about HRC working out our internal process, if we have the time.
If you have the time.
Right.
That's right. I'm saying the same thing. I don't think our process will drive it. It's just, I think any process is shortchanged by 4 days, 2 of which are weekend days.
And we're volunteers. That's amongst others. Like that's and so working on the weekend is extremely altruistic of you. But we also,
I think the Super Bowl might be it. We'll know later.
We're not, Super Bowl was not a part of it, but thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to, like, for the people that we'd be reaching out to, this would be completely new for them. And so to not have a really clear timeline in front of us, and to not have like a really clear purpose and to be able to talk about this to them, how do we know that they're gonna be interested even? This sounds like, even if they know what happened with the DOJ, knowing what that city appealed it, working with the city then after, it's gonna take conversation and time, I think, before we can get to that place. And so I kind of hear what Shabri was saying all the time.
And true community engagement requires, if you really want that piece, then you're going to have to work.
So are you in a position to advocate strongly for this to have time on the agenda
Yes.
for tomorrow? Great.
Yep. I left a 15-minute buffer on the agenda for anything else that needs to come up, but this already fits into a section of it, so we'll have good time to talk about it.
And I'll just say I trust your representation and all of his work or whatever your decisions are.
So it might be useful one, too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Happens when you get lawyers involved. That's what's happening.
Okay, well, we have, in 15 minutes, we need to go into public comment to keep that in line. And where we're leaving off here is still with executive committee and staff report. Do you want to take the lead on that? We'll start at executive committee elections, which we could do. Right? Well, there's 6 of us. I mean, theoretically. But we don't have to.
So I guess, my trepidation on this conversation is that we have nominations that are not enough. Right. There's not enough of us here. We keep talking about 15 and there's not 15 of us here. That's indicative of this conversation, and then the lack thereof of nominees. And I mean, just my personal, we have nominations for chair right now that essentially add up to myself. Right?
And no, there was
Well,
Alan.
there was one for Alan, and
You
Alan
denied.
declined. There was one for you,
One for
you
me.
declined.
I'm declining, and Dale made a long list of the
Yeah.
nominations.
Right.
Anybody here?
Yeah, hold on, I need to see my list, because I think I nominated, like, quite a few people. I think I nominated all three of you, and
Okay, so you, sounds like the only person you may not have heard from is Sonia. Are you in a position to accept Dale's nomination?
I am so honored that you would nominate me again,
This
this time around, again. But I would have to respectfully decline. Thank you.
So.
Y'all, would you be willing to serve? So we're talking about nominations mostly for vice chair. Y'all, are you interested in serving as vice
I mean,
chair?
I've done it before, and yeah, I am. I'm just, I guess, a little saddened at the fact that people don't want to be in the picture for this and stuff.
Well,
But
so
yeah.
that's actually a part, that's me having this, like, what in the heck do I say about it? There's been this, like, leadership transition work and like all this stuff that when Amy stepped in, we said the only way we're gonna even step in the position that we are now is that work gets done. And work, not just the business of making stuff go forward, which unfortunately for the past 3 months,
Yeah.
which feel like they've been 90 months. The amount of work could equate to that, that there had to have been, some movement and change and a shift. And we haven't even been able to like sit down long enough, just as people, as human beings, because we're not robots, to be able to actually move some work out. And it's a lot about what you mentioned before about us having to posture ourselves in a way that we feel makes us whatever to whoever, and I mean, there's a lot of work that has to be talked about around sustainability of just people who are sitting at this table, because this table is powerful because it is community members who come from different, right, we already talked about that, so we don't need to, I mean, the idea is how is it something that people can do, and that they're not constantly under this like valve of pressure that's just so much that it doesn't even make sense. Because you're getting sick, I mean, people just literally are falling off, like they're not, and not because they're not passionate. Every single person who's here knew that they were signing up for a lot of work, but it's not, and so I say all that to say, for the one nominee or that's even saying that and I haven't responded, I haven't accepted or declined, it's just that I would be chair, and that we have other people who would maybe be vice chair, you know, and that's an unfortunate situation, like.
Yeah.
At this point, not everything, excuse me, at this point, so much falls to chair. You know, Shabri and I have worked as a great team, and so much falls to chair.
And there's so many times I defer to her, like, well, you're chair. And I help, and we can have conversations, but at the end of the day, like it is, and that's just based upon the system that we have and how we have it set up. And, you know, we've talked about alternate models. And you have all been chair. You know, you and I are 3 months in. You know, you've been here and you've been vice chair before as well, so I think that,
So, yeah, so in many ways, we're still in the same place that we were at. I do think there's been movement, you know, a little bit of jostling it up, but we're not in a place where I would feel comfortable saying, yeah, Shabri's and the whole system is ready to go and everything's gonna be fine.
I don't either.
And I think that's a great thing
Yeah.
for people next to you to speak up and say, because you're such a valuable leader, we would not want to put all of that onus on you. And that's something I wish I would have had, but you get into the chair role and you realize that you cannot, it's like, it's forever moving. You can't even stop. You can't catch a breath.
That's what we've experienced in the
You
last 3
can't
months.
catch a breath. And so, unless there is a plan in which we can say, you know, Madam Chair, can we take this off of your plate? Or that you feel comfortable saying, you know, these are my advisors. These are the folks that, you know, they're worker bees, they're gonna do it, and I can hand these things off to them, not necessarily in decision-making, but in the work. So if that's making a call, if that's checking in with folks, to be able to say that you know that those 2 or 3 people are going to be there. And I think that's the challenge right now, is folks being willing to step up and say, I'm willing just to be a worker bee, to work for our chair and help the chair and the vice chair get the work done. And I think that's the challenge that I ran into, is I would put those opportunities out there and people would not respond. You know, you put it out there and it's like, I'm ghost, see you later, gotta go. And yet we still want to be taken seriously by the city when, you know, there are deadlines and there are times in which we have to respond quickly. You
Like
know,
right now.
Right, we've got to respond quickly. So how can we as fellow commissioners, if you do consider, is there something that you would foresee, a plan in place or an idea of a plan that you think would work?
So one of the things that Amy and I have talked extensively about was we pushed back this nomination, or this nomination and elections until now because we were in the midst of something else. I also talked about, it was very, very, very extremely important to me that we do some of this work, that we have these conversations, and we've talked about the need for a retreat. And it requires everybody to be in the room to really have these conversations around, is that the model? Is it a co-chair model? Are we gonna blow it all up and change it to some other kind of model? What does it really look like? We need to be in the room for enough time to just get that done. And in the meantime, we recognize there's still work to be done. So one of the things we talked about was setting up a retreat. It's listed here, leadership transition work and retreat planning. That possibly happening in March. And I don't even know, why did we move in March? It had to do with your schedule?
idea?
It had to do with your schedule.
Oh, because, so I'm completing my 3rd year on the HRC and not planning to re-up. So that was gonna give me time to be around, whether it was continuing on as chair or outgoing chair or whatever, and then but mostly continuing with this transition work we've been doing, and then to be able to complete that in March.
And before that happens, having a retreat, being able to have some conversation, and you know me, let's get some action out of it, let's walk out with something. Because I am also not comfortable accepting a nomination. Yet again, I'm saying this again, like this is what I said last time. If we're not gonna get any work done. And if we can decide to hold off, Amy and I think have talked about the fact that we can hold on as is now, up until and through March, with this work happening, a retreat having taken place, and an actual collective conversation around what that really looks like. And I think then we may have more people who are stepping up, accepting up. There might be more nominations than like just little old me, which I'm brand new and so I can't say brand new anymore after this meeting.
Yeah.
If you guys look in March, you'll have also more new commissioners.
Right.
That's all I would say.
So you're saying,
Maybe a larger pool to choose from.
Say that one more time.
We'll have a larger pool.
You might have a larger pool to choose from.
sure, but, so that not the retreat in March, but the decision-making by March, the retreat would happen like in February or something?
We were thinking retreat in March.
Oh, retreat in March, okay.
Were we? I thought we were saying.
I think that it should happen in March because we don't know when the nominations committee is gonna get new members onto the commission. And we wanna have all the new people also be able to go to the retreat. Right.
Sam is going to try and do interviews for the people who have submitted applications
Very soon.
within the next couple of weeks.
So that's Sam's nominating report.
And so that's gonna be.
There you go.
nominating.
So that's good. I think that's a fair process moving forward. I will say that, there was some point talk about co-chairs and whether or not it would require a bylaw.
Changing the bylaws.
No, not a bylaw, it's definitely a bylaw change, but we're not taking ordinance change. The ordinance, the city ordinance does not speak to,
Chair.
or Right.
organizational.
Exactly. So that's just an FYI, I looked it up.
Thank you.
After our
Right.
last conversation about that. So it's
Okay,
an
so-
easier change than.
So I think the conversation really is, because this, a part of what we're supposed to do and be done in like 30 seconds so that we can go straight to public comment, so we can adhere to and respect everyone's time, is that, do we need to take a movement to, what do we need to do to go ahead and hold this off then?
I move that we table the elections for this meeting, and that Amy and Cherie remain in their leadership positions until, so it's gotta be the April meeting if we do it, so it's until the April meeting.
Second.
April what? April 2nd is the date.
Oh, I just seconded.
Oh, you seconded, oh.
I was moving it forward.
I'm sorry. Remember, it's after. Okay.
Okay.
I'm probably supposed to be doing this. Okay, all those in favor of Alan's motion, seconded by Diallo, raise your hand with an aye, please. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. We're right on time for public comments.
Look at us. It's a feat.
Public comments are right there.
She's
Was
right there.
Ryan Stroud on the list?
He was.
It's right there in the middle.
Yes.
How you doing?
Good.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
He's the gentleman that you brought in.
You said he was going back to 5:45.
No, 6:20.
And I don't know if they were, but he left the letter, so I'm going to.
Okay. Let's see who comes back. Johnny Dwork? Oh, no, wait, yes.
There we go.
Okay, Kathleen Maloney.
I would like for Joe to make my announcement. It's a joint announcement for our organization.
Okay, would you want to come up here?
Sure. Thank you.
Anywhere we find a seat?
Okay. Well, my name's Joe Bergeron, and I'm a policy consultant for the American Society for the Positive Care of Children. And we just wanted to say thank you for assisting us in promoting our youth forum on November 20th, like we requested last time. Yeah, definitely made a big difference. We had excellent attendance. We had full attendance. We had a space for 175, and we had at least that many people sign in to the event. We started to get good feedback, and we're updating our website with photographs and video and next steps to keep our youth participants involved. And I was able to meet with Diallo this week to sort of discuss ongoing networking opportunities, and we're just going to keep on staying in touch. And you'll probably see us at some other meetings here in the future too.
Great,
Thank you very much.
Were you guys here for the conversation earlier with Donna?
Yes.
Actually, about, okay, so you heard.
I got here a little late.
And Diallo and Emmanuel came.
That's right, excuse me, another Human Rights Commissioner, Emmanuel Price, attended as well.
And Damon was going to come, but he at the last minute couldn't. So we had almost 3 commissioners there. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any questions before? Okay.
Thank you for coming back just to say thank you.
Yeah.
Gratitude all around.
Courtney is not here. Yes, there you are.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there. Hello. Oh,
Happy
sorry.
Thanksgiving and all that. Should I say Merry Thanksgiving?
Some people say Native American Holocaust Day.
So I wanted to talk to you about profiling. So I was talking to Donna out in the hallway for a few minutes there. I was suggesting to her that she get a hold of CIO, which is the Center for Intercultural Organizing. I hope most of you know who they are. They've been writing a bill about profiling. And it initially started as racial profiling, but I had a chat with them because I had a problem with that. Profiling it's more, so many people are tempted to say it's about color and stuff like that, but it's so much more than that. I represent the houseless community, who I work with an awful lot. And so many of the houseless community are profiled as well.
I mean, people just walking down the street, based on the way you look on a daily basis, if you've got a backpack, chances are downtown you're houseless, and the police are gonna harass you for some reason or other. But it goes so much deeper than that. And I've got a friend named, his nickname is Skippy on the street. He's got a traumatic brain injury. And he moves and acts like he's had a stroke, okay? And I was sitting on the pillars in Chinatown one day waiting for him. And he came up on his bicycle, and he rides like speed, it scares me the way this man rides a bike. But anyway, he comes blasting down the sidewalk. And the police, I'm sitting here, and the police pull around on the block, in the sidewalk, and stop him. And they said, "You've been using drugs today." And he said, "No, I haven't." And they said, "Well, let me see your arms." So he goes like this. And he's got rashes all up and down his arms, which I've taken pictures of. And he's got tape on the other side. Obviously, one of his caregivers has been trying to take care of him and stuff. And they said, "Well, you've been using drugs today. I can see the marks on your arms." And I'm thinking to myself, this is madness. This is absolute madness. Who does this? And the other police officer came around. He was a little bit younger, and he says, "You look hungry. If you come with me, I can get you a sandwich." And Skip's like, No, I don't want to go with you. I don't want to go with you." And that's when I jumped in. And I said, "Why have you stopped this morning?" "Oh, we didn't do that." "Really? You pull your police car on the sidewalk in front of his bicycle and stop him. There's no way you could have possibly gotten around. And you're going to tell me you didn't stop this guy." Well, Skippy gets stopped by the police a lot. And I use him as an example because he's an excellent one. He's got mental issues going on. He's got physical limitations. And he's harassed continuously about a great many things. And I said to him, "Skippy, why don't you tell him you're disabled?" And he said, "I don't have to." And he's absolutely right. He doesn't have to. But I tell you that to tell you this. It came to my attention over the summertime. I was watching a lot of police officers walk around the city, and I wondered why in groups. And I'm wondering, why are they walking around in groups? And I finally stopped them, and I said, "Okay, so what are you guys doing?" And I said, "Oh, we're going around, we're doing an educational thing for like a couple of weeks or whatever it was. We're inviting people to come and show us how they use their drugs. They bring the people in there, they don't have to use their real names, they'll give them a sandwich, whatever. And they invite them to use their drugs in front of them so the police officers can learn what a sober person looks like as opposed to one that's on whatever drug they're using." Fantastic idea. But come to find out from the teacher, these classes are optional. Why are they optional? Why? And with all the rioting going around the city and all the things that have happened and all the discourse between the public and the police, why is such training optional? I don't understand. It makes no sense to me. So I urge you, in your looking at this entire issue and all the riots and stuff that's going on lately, please consider that. Such training should not be optional for anyone. And come to find out from the teacher, most of the cops can't be bothered to even bother to take the class, which again makes no sense to me. How can you pick, I've got allergies and my eyes are all bloodshot red because I just petted a dog. And how do you pick me, and tell me I'm using drugs as opposed to somebody who actually is? You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So if you would please include some of that in your research, I'd appreciate it. You have a great
Hold on,
I have a question.
Mind holding on 1 second for question? Oh, please, go ahead.
So I never knew about that specific training that they had the option to opt out on. Do they also, since you spoke to the teacher, do you know if they also do any type of education around war on drugs or around people that use and how to actually deal with that as well?
It was my understanding that that was their education.
Okay.
But in watching the way police have handled various, communities out there, I don't think anybody's much paying attention. But then again, they're not required to take this class, so they're pretty much flying at the seat of their pants, and I understand that. I mean, they're out there with pretty much a target on their back in the community. They have to be on guard at all times, and I appreciate that, I understand it. But on the same time, they got into their positions because they're compassionate. They're trying to make a difference, they're trying to help people, they're trying to keep people safe. But they have to be educated, and if they're not, there's no point.
Did you say that the training happens as they invite people off the street and they offer a sandwich?
Yes. Yes. And they're let go. Yes.
Any other questions?
And who facilitates
Ethical.
this training?
It's the police department.
So the people who are using drugs are teaching the police officers how they use their drugs.
Yeah, what they did
And
was
the
they.
officers give them a sandwich in return?
Yeah. Yeah, what they do is they go around in teams of 2 and they try to, get people out of the community to come with them and show them.
Is there a name for this type of training or
I,
program? or
there
is it
probably
just
is,
something
but
they
I don't
just
know what
do?
it is off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
I personally have more questions about the training itself and what way in which it happens. I mean, I think furthering an educational lesson for folks who are going to be doing this is a big deal. And questions around those things being voluntary or not as a whole, I think is a big deal. This particular training is interesting. I too have not heard of it, and it's kind of it's just all kinds of flags that are going with my head just around just around the training itself. But the idea of training being voluntary is, I think, a big part of a lot of the work that we've been talking about, and thank you for bringing that up again with regard to this particular issue.
What I found scary about it was talking to the community about it, the houseless community about it, like particularly across the river. I was told that, no, they weren't given a choice. They were told, okay, I'm gonna bust you and send you to jail if you don't come with us. It wasn't a, hey, could you come and show us what you're doing? So, although here, I haven't heard that from this side of the river.
So just to ask you one more question, are you a proponent then of this type of training, or what do you feel about, I mean, you feel that it, I mean, I guess, what is your feeling about this particular?
I think education is fantastic. Okay. I think we are all undereducated when it comes to a lot of things, but I think that the police department in particular should be educated on very many things, and they're not, unfortunately. I mean, the fact that they're not required to take such training, and they can't tell the difference between someone like Skippy and a drug addict is a shame. I mean, again, he moves and acts like he's had a stroke. He doesn't speak well, okay? And I mean, to see him pick up a pen is like this, and it takes him at least 3 to 5 minutes to do that. How do you equate that to drug use? It just boggles my mind.
I'm afraid we're gonna have to move on. We do know how to get a hold of Courtney if we have more questions for her, and I do too. You raised some things that I'm really curious about, concerned about.
Thank you.
Thank you. David? David's not here? Dan? Not here? And that's it, right? Anybody else that I missed, skipping around? Yeah.
So Ryan and Johnny came and wanted to talk about something. They left some paper that they had a conversation about.
Well,
What to do with
I
the water.
told them that they could come back for 6:20. So why don't we see if they'll come back for the 6:20, and if not, we can present that at that time, yeah.
Can I make a quick
Yeah, I was gonna say,
statement?
you might ask, it looked like there might be other folks in the
Okay.
audience, so you might ask if there are folks.
After listening to the whole meeting here, I thought maybe I'll just mention a real quick little thing. I went out and filmed the protest on Tuesday after the AMA was on the steps, and there must have been 2,000 or more people. It was like blocks and blocks long. It took probably 20 blocks long of just people filling the streets. And when it was over with, the next group started out. And so long story short, I got my car, went across the river. When I heard they were on the other side, I started following them again, joined up under the bridge. And it was really intimidating, and I worked my way up the steps, and then the steps were blocked off. When I looked down, there's police down there with guns looking up. The video, when I'm watching it, feels like I'm filming army men in Iraq or something. When I got on the bridge, I thought, well, I'll walk down, all blocked off. So my only choice is go back downtown. As I went back across the bridge downtown, a whole group had amassed on the other side, and they proceeded to walk up Washington to PG Stadium. Police way behind. This group was pretty much just walking peacefully, chanting. One point was quiet, hands in the air. There was some rude F the police comments here and there. It was a little more rowdier. But by the time it got to the end, a big standoff happened where the police amassed and then all lined up with the robo riot cops and marched towards the group. Everybody out of the street, long story short. Bike cops came in on the side and just attacked the group. They just, without any nothing really happened. Just all of a sudden they probably got a command to make some arrests. So they charged in the group, everybody. It was just crazy, screaming, people yelling. I started yelling. I hadn't yelled all night, but I started thinking it was wrong. And then as soon as that happened, to arrest the police, the robo riot, and horses. And now everybody's agitated and really getting more pissed off. And they're allowed to get onto the sidewalk off the street. One of the riot cops came up to me and shoved me while I was on the sidewalk. And then I had a banter with him, like, why are you treating me like that? And I'm following the orders. I'm on the sidewalk. He said, you were told to move back. In my opinion, I don't know. I'm standing on the sidewalk. The loudspeaker says, get out of the street. A big riot cop comes up to me and hits me hard enough to knock himself back. Didn't hurt. I'm not bruised or nothing to report. But I didn't like him. That really pissed me off. And how he treated me and the dynamics that start to be created by all of this. We're all watching these cops just be mean to everybody out there or have this attitude. And I just wanted to tell you guys all about it. I'm thinking about filing a complaint. I have it all on videotape. The people getting arrested, the two, and then the cop hitting me. But it just creates a real bad dynamic. And you know, after they made the arrest and backed away, the people all kind of went back out in the street again. So it was all like, and it dissipated. But it seemed like it was all a big formality over, I don't know what, a principle of the street. And it creates a big separation in our community. So just wanted to let you guys know that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions? I have one. Name badges, did you observe any missing name badges on?
I didn't see that, no.
You didn't see missing ones, or you
Yeah,
didn't see
I didn't
badges?
notice anybody with missing. They do have lots of stuff that covers their badges,
They have a-
walkie-talkies and.
Yeah, well, they have a directive that requires them to have name badges on their exterior clothing.
The riot cop in front of me, his name was real big, right in front, and I said, hi, Mr. Fender. Yeah.
And then we move on.
So Mike, let me ask you, in that situation, what do you think would have helped diffuse the situation?
When I see these streets blocked for every reason under the sun in Portland downtown all year long continuously, to have some people marching in the streets, it would probably, they come and they go, they move on. I heard there was a die-in the other day that caused some. I think these things happen quick and they can move on if they would just provide some protection, a little bit of safety, because we are people too of the community, even though we're protesting. And we have a right to protest and point these things out, and the police come looking at us like it's scary. I mean, I'm actually running from people with guns that are after me because I dare speak out or stand out. I think they should provide a little let us protest, and if there's no violence happening or no real extreme rowdiness, block the streets on it. And another point, I think you said too, the first march was permitted. I don't think there was a permit for the first
Permitted might be the wrong word.
AMA march, because they had no police leading them or blocking for them either. It's kind of like, it seems like the attitude is like, oh, you don't want a permit? Good luck, I hope you don't get hurt. And they just back off. Now, the thing I like about that is, there is no violence. Nobody does get hurt. It's, the irony is, yeah.
Thank you. Is that video on your site?
Yeah, in Indie Media.
Any other comments, yes, ma'am?
I have a comment for Levon, who's not here.
Yeah.
The Portland Commission on Disability, they're doing advised assistant chief change. It's
I'm
gonna,
sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
the the PCOD, Portland Commission on Disability. They're doing they're doing a potluck following their full commission meeting. Find out more about that commission's work, get to know the commissioners, enjoy food, connection, and community. Friday, December 14th, here at the Commonwealth Building. It'll probably be in this room, in fact. The full commission meeting is open to the public from 10 a.m. to 1, and the potluck is open to the public from 1 to 3 p.m. And if you're interested, there's more flyers like this that give more of a deeper description.
Today is the 14th, but it is.
12.
Thank you. So I suggest we do some house cleaning, which includes minutes, approving the minutes. Actually, that's the only thing we need to do back up top. So could y'all take a look at the minutes and let us know if you have any changes required, requested? I have just a minor one, COCO is COCL. Okay. Sam, what's your last one? Oh, so we have a question about the CPRC report.
So there's nothing there. Was he not here? Did he not?
I think I wasn't the CPRC, he made the CPRC. And
Okay.
so I stepped out and I asked him to send me an email. He said his email said I didn't have anything to report.
Okay. Does anybody who was at this last meeting remember anything from CPRC that we should put for minutes per meeting?
I don't remember, I know we went into some minor stuff, but I
You
don't
brought
know.
up new members and commission meetings, people. That's what I remember.
So can you just add to it that he mentioned the need for new CPRC members? I think it's the most that we, it's a continued thing, but I think it's yeah.
I'll give him this.
Thank you.
His email just said I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like a motion that we accept these minutes with the change to the COCO acronym and the addition for the CPRC report.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Sorry? Did you abstain?
Yes, I thought you were gonna get to that. You kind of like shut down shop for everybody.
Would you record this, would you
I
abstain?
abstained, thank you.
Okay.
Now that you're running short on time, did you check if there was more public
Any
comment? And I
final
also see
call
that, I also
for-
see that Charles.
Final call for public comment.
Thank you. Also look like they're contemplating.
So much table to do.
Outside of Charles, is there anyone else who's interested in making public comment or anything? Okay, we want to make sure we don't pass someone up. Okay.
There's a lot of tables.
Yeah, I didn't mean to jump the line, whatever line it might be. So, while y'all working, so you'll be maybe deviously pleased to know that the city council just finished.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. The primary issue was the OIR report on officer-involved shootings. And of course, they accepted the report. They paid for it, maybe they ought to accept it, except they probably shouldn't.
And I think one thing that the Human Rights Commission might want to look at is the Office of the Auditor really the moral and right place for this to come from? The real job of the Office of City Auditor, if you really watch how it operates, is just to limit city legal liability. It doesn't actually address the quality of life for any citizen in Portland. It talks about insurance coverage and lawsuits, but when we're talking about people having violent interactions with the police that often end up with their death, that's really a human rights issue, in addition to being, secondly, a financial problem for the city. And so I hope that in your interaction with Office of Equity and Human Rights, that we can foment some discussion there. There's always turf in the city. They can keep the OIR, because I think many of the citizens feel it's not that good a report. And what the Human Rights Commission, I think, would be better to advocate for is something besides the mayor's State of the City speech, which really looks at what communities in our city of Portland are harmed, what communities maybe have excess privilege that really perpetuates that harm, both on the broader scale of whole communities and neighborhoods, and the way the OIR report is structured, it looked at about 7 or 8 fatalities, but because of different information that's available, it jumps around and chunks some years. It doesn't really get up to the last 2 people killed by police that are in the IPR report. So I think that if the city, when it charged you and asked you to volunteer as human rights commissioners, is serious about human rights, there needs to be, and I'm not that familiar with what you might all do, sort of as an annual cumulative review, but somewhere in our city, we need to have honest talk that's not what happens in the city council often is people come up and it's like, this is somebody's little project and let's talk nice about it, but we need, instead of a report that documents, well, it was hard to clear this cop for killing this person because these directives are unclear. It never really gets to the point of, why do police feel so compelled to pull their guns when they haven't been shot at first? I mean, to me, that's, we'll never really get the police association on board with that, but I really think that human rights means that, doesn't mean shooting suspicious people, which is really the policy of the police. If they think somebody might be a threat, they might shoot them, more so if they're black or in the wrong neighborhood. So I hope that I can engage with y'all in the Office of Equity and Human Rights so that we can get, instead of 100 and some pages of confusing, here's 21 things that will make things policing better and Portland, we can say, these are all the unfortunate people who've been killed justifiably or not by the police since whatever time period, everyone in a row, so that we know what our culture of fear with the police department is really, the toll it's really taking on us. The second issue that consumed a chunk of time is also very much an equity and human rights issue, but it gets flounced around with a lot of fancy economic language. They're adjusting the urban renewal, and some good things happen, some bad things happen with that. Some things are as unpopular as Trader Joe's plans in Northeast, which the community stands up and says, no, not good enough. But that is another, human rights and economics are intertwined, and if the Human Rights Commission wants to kind of partner with the city or the Office of Equity and Human Rights, I think it would be sad to see the level of economic options that foment around these urban renewal areas when real communities that are suffering serious disadvantages that haven't managed to get a 3-letter tag of urban renewal area slapped on them are left neglected and suffering. Thanks, y'all.
report, I think those are, we've got two of the last final items about that, city communications and budget.
Okay, as far as the city communications piece, I do not believe there have been any new pieces outside of, the idea, the relationship that was formed that, Charlie, Mayor Hales would, be having conversations with us on a regular basis. That was still there. The idea of, as issues do arise, such as,
Oh, well, we were talking about the appeal and the.
Thank you, the DOJ, I apologize for my brain right now. Yes, the appeal and things like that, as things arise, that there also is an opportunity, that's still there. The relationship is, what we just look forward to continuing to support. Nothing new. Any questions about that? Any questions about city communication? Okay.
I can add to
Oh,
that. There's been conversation and requests through Kenya from Mayor Hale's office about giving them more time, more advance notice before a press release.
Oh.
So I'm just throwing that out there so that y'all are informed about that. And my instinct is to have a conversation with that staff person. One, so we can hear that communication directly as executive committee. If it goes to Kenya, that's fine with me too, but I think if we're receiving a request from that office, we need to develop the relationship with that office directly around that topic. And two, I think there's response to that's percolating among us about how we can do that, if we can do that, and when we can do that, because there's issues such as if we're dealing with the public comment, with a public comment, there's timing involved, and we may not, if we do give more time and allow for conversation, that's a great thing, because I feel like 50% of our leverage is within those closed doors and in communication, one-on-one. But the other 50% is our ability to make public statements in a very timely manner.
And it'd be helpful to know their reasoning of why they would need that longer.
What they want to do with that, that time.
Yeah. And so does that mean that we need to let them know now about this letter?
It means that we need to do nothing. All it means is that's the request that they're making.
Well, and I think what they're talking about is they too are human. They want to be able to take a moment to look at and have a conversation about the same thing we're asking them for, right?
Exactly.
The time. So it's all about time, and I think it's about respecting each other, because that's the idea. And I think that we should just have that in our mind. That should be a mindset. Whether or not it's something we can do based upon timing of what's actually occurring in the community is something else. And we can do what we can do, and I think that's a part of the respectful relationship we're asking each other to have.
How much time is he asking for? Because this letter.
It's not Charlie. It's just before we say something.
Okay.
Giving them time to respond to us or have a meeting with us before we hit send on said whatever it is to the press or whoever.
Okay.
Not that that will
asking
change
for a
anything.
Are they asking for a meeting, or are they just asking to?
No, this is all, just to clarify, this is all information that's come through you.
Yeah, and so what I've said is not that they want a meeting, but that they just want to be informed, so they want to receive the first, they want to receive a draft prior to the draft being published. They didn't ask me, through me, for a meeting. I think if they feel like they need a meeting, that'll be a separate ask, but what they're asking is that they just be allowed to read it first.
And that's the conversation we had when I was chair, was the concern about the mayor's office not wanting to be caught off guard with any communication that we had not previously brought to him through the form of meeting with him. The challenge with being able to fulfill that request was we were never able to get a meeting with the mayor to let him know what was on our agenda. Therefore, we had to move without him. This was prior to you joining the commission. So oftentimes it's, we want to be in front of the mayor. We want to be inclusive as far as it goes with sharing our message and what we plan to share with the community. but oftentimes it took a year for us to get a meeting with the mayor. So I'm not certain to what degree we could really extend that when we don't have the opportunity to share with him. And that opportunity is not often extended. That may have changed, and that's great now that you're here and you're able to liaise between his office. But prior to you, the challenge was we often had to step on the gas. And if we wanted to seek the mayor's input, it was not there.
So I think
in a timely fashion.
there's a delineation between meeting and I'm not saying either, but and simply informing, like, just so you know,
Yeah,
this is
so
going out in 2
simply
days.
informing,
That's one thing
right.
versus the sit down and have a
And
meeting.
so even prior to that, we weren't made aware of his concerns about what we were saying was going to the, community too fast. He didn't, no one from his office reached out to us to say, why are you guys saying this? I think it was actually us trying to check one another about what we could and could not say. And having both Malloy and Kyle at the table, I think we found even greater restraint amongst ourselves to try to, curtail what we would say to the public. So I'm just a little bit astonished by the sudden need to make him aware or his office aware, even if it's not with the expectation of a meeting.
And they don't have any, there was no talk about them having any veto power over what we say.
No, in fact, when we sat down with him at a meeting, one of the things he specifically specified was that he has no assumption that conversations would mean he has the power to say, don't go forth and do it. He might say it, and I might say, okay, thank you. And that might, you know what I'm saying? And so the idea behind the meetings was just a time for us to have conversation and a time for us to be informed personally around what's not happening. And also, one of the things we came out of that particular meeting talking about was it's good for us to know these perspectives, these things, where you, or how you feel you arrived at these decisions that we still don't agree with. That's good for us,
Right.
and the 3 people who were in that room, but then for the rest of your constituency, they'd like to know. And so we talked about us helping to look at ways that we can have conversations, again, the idea of conversations and having, people be aware of things, something that could come up, something that we can do. And I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, one of those things that comes up for me is the appeal was announced at a very short time frame before the vote. Then the COLC was announced at a very short time frame before the vote. So one of the things I'd like to talk to them about is if you are really interested in hearing from us as an advisory body, we got to figure out how to stretch that out. Because we're volunteers, by the time we get everybody on board about that, it's Friday. And then we've got we don't want to do the weekend, we've got Monday at the best to get it out.
And on top of that, there have been built-in places where they take public comment or whatever, this input. And Amy, you sat at some of these, in particular for the COPL decision. And what the public said, what they landed on, was literally the exact opposite of where we are now. And so the conversation is also one that says, even when you build in places that we as HRC commissioners are there, and then you choose to not listen, or whatever, and it's their prerogative as elected, we elected them there to make these decisions, that you can't keep asking, or not that you can't keep, you can keep, and then people can either answer you or just call your bluff if you're not going to ever use it. Why pull people together and go through the whole process and then go, thank you, but no.
I mean, that's an understanding that has to be reached between the 2 entities, because just like the understanding that HRC isn't always going to be in agreement with what the mayor does or doesn't do, I think that it goes both ways. We know that they're not always going to take our opinions or take our course of action that we ask them to take, but I don't think that that's any reason for anybody to take all their toys and leave the game, because we have the rest of time to have something where they do absolutely take the advice that's given to them. And there's times when they're gonna want something that they're gonna want us to do something, and we just won't be able to do it. We just won't have an interest, or it won't be in our best interest to do it. So I think that when we talk in absolutes, when people are listening to absolutes, they start, you guys are a powerful group, and I'm asking that we're careful about not talking in absolutes.
Well, that's true, but to make space and ask for something and then to negate everything that just happened, that in itself is a behavior that I want to continue to bring in place in front of them. Whether or not it changes the capacity for people to, and I appreciate our capacity to not agree and to move forward in whatever way we as a body can do, but we don't sit here and continuously ask people to talk to us and then never take, you know, you come and ask us to go to a place, we go to a place and hopefully it helped and you came back and told us that it did. That's one small aspect of what that is, but I think that that's something that we have to talk, it's a systematic issue, right? And so these are elected people and it's a whole different line of thinking, but I hear what you're saying, and it's not about absolutes, it's simply about don't ask, but how do you take this information that you now have from community members and go forth with it as if it were something that you actually cared about?
I understand what's underneath that. I understand the feeling around, hey, we feel minimized, maybe very minimized, because you didn't take the advice that we gave you. But I think that maybe we talk to them regarding about what's underneath it, which is the feeling of being minimized and the sense that one can only be minimized so much before they disappear.
Can you have a question? Is there somebody designated from the mayor's staff to be like a liaison to our commission? Who is that?
Diana Nunez.
Okay. And then I guess in the past I haven't been the majority of the commission. Does Diana attend these meetings?
She would, but I mean, she says that she will.
Mm-hmm.
She's agreed to, but she hasn't. She's only made one meeting with the HRC, and that was with the executive.
So what would it take, I guess, to get kind of, because that's part of the relationship building that we're all talking about, kind of that long-term piece. So is it somebody from your office that could connect with the mayor's office or with Diana and kind of get that going? I think that's a piece that would be helpful for everybody.
I think we tried to get that going, and we can't control her schedule.
So how have you, do you just like ask her for every meeting to attend if she's unable to?
We send her an invite.
And one of the things we did do is when we sat down, we asked in particular for 4 certain meetings. 2 would be those that it has nothing to do with an emerging issue because we want those to be just available as things come up. But 2 sit downs with Charlie Mayor Hales in particular, and the executive committee, and then 2 that were him / representative at an HRC meeting because these are standing meetings. And we specified if there had to be a preference between one of the 2 that he was here to hear the larger breadth of the commission versus just myself, and Alan. So, yeah, that was a build-in as to what this communications piece of.
We got a verbal agreement that day from him that he was interested in coming, and he would come as to what Shabri just.
And that would begin in 2014 or 2015?
It was, to my understanding, it would begin possibly in 2014. But shortly after that, he had a schedule revamp, and so his availability was pretty much cut in half. It was even more limited. And I don't know what his calendar looks like now, but what I am aware of is that he isn't doing very many appearances, so to speak. So they've reorganized the way his schedule works.
Go ahead. Is there any way that we could connect with Diana and see maybe there's somebody else on staff that would have a more open, I guess, schedule that would be able to attend?
She has the most open schedule on that staff.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like we talk very frequently with Josh Albert, who his schedule is very, very limited. We can never get him on the phone, but we always call him. And so Diana is the one who has consistently picked up the phone or returned calls or even come over here in person.
Well, and I don't think the conversation is really about do they have to be at the table for us to do work. We've said that that's not going to limit us. If they want to be a part of making a decision or some space between us making action, we're going to do as best as we can. And we're going to give them as much time as we can, as much time as allotted, and that is what we can do. With the understanding that we'd like to respect everybody as people with time and so on and so forth. So I think that's.
Yeah, and I want to clarify the situation that I think Shabri was speaking to, where they didn't listen to community feedback was not so much the our HRC feedback, was the more community.
I understood
COAB
what she was
process.
saying.
Okay, good. And the other thing I want to say is, I'm aware that this is the beginning of a new era, I feel, for the commission and the city, particularly the mayor's office. And so I'm encouraged that these trickles, these bumps are trying to figure it out. And I think the more there's direct communication with executive committee would be great, or other people, assuming certain leadership within HRC, from Diana, the liaison right now, that would be great, even if it's not if that's by phone.
So you want Diana to be in direct contact with chair, co-chair?
That makes sense to me.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Have you, because I remember this is something that you brought up before, have you contacted her and let her know that?
I mean, no, but that's something else I'm interested in.
Do you want me to also say to her, hey, here's who you need to contact?
Let's talk about it.
You have a budget form that we need to
I do.
address, thank you.
So, I don't know if you guys have it. We'll pass that one to you. I don't know if you have it. And the stuff that was in front of you guys, in front of the names, just Shabri and
Oh,
Amy
yes,
has in
thank
front
you.
of their name tags.
I thought that was something totally different. So what this is, I'm just gonna, I guess I'll leave this off. This was a request of mine to Kenya. There was a issue before of people not submitting budget yet, and people either thought they submitted it and they thought they submitted information that was sufficient, and they either knew because Kenya told them that it wasn't enough, or they didn't know and they were just sitting in some limbo that they didn't even realize. And I said what needs to happen from OEHR is them to give us a basic template of what they want us to put on there, and then we can ask chairs to fill it in. And if that's all that they need, then we're good to go, and there's no ambiguity regarding who's done what they said they were supposed to do, or they thought they had already done. So, you wanna go ahead and,
This is what we came up with as a per project budget worksheet. So if you have, say your committee has 4 projects, you submit 4 of these.
Okay.
Committee has 1 project, you submit 1. And so it's kind of self-explanatory. You plug in the project name, the report, the date that you're sending the report, the date that you anticipate these expenses to occur on, and the description of what the expense is, then the cost that was planned, and the cost what you were actually invoiced. If you've not been invoiced for it, like if it's a future thing, like say catering, event catering, that's future for 12 or for 2/15, then they can't have an actual cost because they don't know yet. But they've already budgeted for it. If you look on the back, this didn't print the whole thing. This is a handy little piece because it tells you right there how much you're over or under the budget that you had assumed that you'd be. And then at the bottom, it gives you your final project total.
Great, the only suggestion I would have is maybe a clarification of what the date means.
The date means the day that you're, so sample project or just the word date?
Report date.
The report date is the day that you
No.
send in the project, the document.
Okay. I would
And then the date on the left side in the expense category, that's the date that either the expense occurred on or that you anticipated occurring.
Right, that's what I'm just suggesting goes in with more, has more language in there so people understand that.
Yeah. And
You might just build on date of expense.
Okay, our accountant in the room is very helpful.
So date of expense. Or anticipated / date of expense.
Yeah, something like that.
And the only people that have to do this are the project leads or the committee chairs. Everybody isn't expected to send one of these.
So I would see that the committees work it out amongst themselves to determine who's going to be sending that in.
And in order to get these forms, people have to come to HR? Will you
It's
send it
gonna be, I'm gonna
electronically?
send it to the committee chairs electronically.
Okay.
Everybody.
And can we have like,
Yes. I think it would be
The
great for everyone to
problem
have
with
it,
that-
just so
Yeah.
if, as leadership switches or someone else steps in it, there's not a, someone had it and someone else didn't have it. I mean, it's
Well,
not
if anybody
proprietary.
needs it, just email me or call me and say, hey, send me the project, the budget worksheet. I'm just afraid that I'll start getting budget worksheets for things that aren't actual projects or for pieces of projects. And I'd like to just get the whole
Yeah.
project worksheet in one.
Okay.
Kenya, would it be also possible as we bring on new members to add this to the booklet of tools that we equip them with?
This will be part of the orientation.
Orientation packet, okay.
Okay, yeah, it is after 6:30. This has been an interesting meeting time-wise, and we need to make some hard, fast decisions about what we do tonight and what we don't do tonight. Biggest item is Alan came with some public communications about public comment, I'm sorry, communications about our communications, policies and protocols, so we move that to next month? Okay. So number 8, we will move to next month. Maybe we just mention the DOJ and COCO, and then run through committee and task force reports. And we do need to give note to the public comment that didn't happen earlier.
I guess that does fit within emerging issues though.
Okay, we'll do that last, how's that?
Is it time sensitive?
Well, kind of, yeah. It is actually time sensitive. We can't wait till next meeting.
DOJ appeal and COCO? Maybe that's just kind of
We were just talking about the fact that it happened, that there was a letter that was written. This letter was the reason that this whole burgeoning conversation around them wanting more time before something was submitted occurred. We all saw it. It was sent to us. It was sent to everyone else. I guess are there questions about that? Do folks want to talk about that process? We don't have much time, but it happened. I think we just want to specify that it happened, and we know that there is another action item right now on the docket, and Diallo is helping with that, and Sam's, well, as you confer with Sam on what he's looking at. And it essentially specified that we did not agree with their decision for the appeal. We also did not agree with their decision for the COCO. These things happened after a sit-down meeting with the mayor that he did in fact make time for, and we had a great conversation that again just led to creative tension and and just the fact that we like to make certain that we come out of these places of non-agreement with generative things to move forward, such as having conversations within the community so that they can share their perspective with community members if they too are concerned with their decisions and actions that have been made. Okay.
Great. Emily Gottfried's awards team has announcements?
Yes. So the team met this morning, and so as you know, the awards luncheon is Thursday, right? So a week from tomorrow. So the first request is for HRC members. If you have not signed up to attend yet, then please contact Kenya. So HRC members, don't go through the regular registration process, but please contact Kenya if you're planning to attend. And are the folks here who are planning to attend next Thursday?
I'm seeing it.
So you'll be there?
So will you guys
So-
still send me an email just so that
Yeah.
I can make sure that you count it and in the Excel spreadsheet?
And specify whether you wish to have a vegan or non-vegan, what kind of salad is it again?
Cobb salad.
Cobb salad. Okay. The other is we'll need a few volunteers. So if there are HRC members that there's a couple of different volunteer roles. There's going to be a group of folks who are meeting at 9:30 a.m. to set up the room. And then the event starts at 11. And so that we need folks to help at the registration table and for hosting, kind of ushering folks who have questions in the room. So I think we probably need just a couple of folks. Is there anybody around this table that can show up at either of those 2 times?
I got an email from one of the nominees or one of the applicants for HRC. She was a volunteer at the roundtable. She's since left,
Yeah.
but she volunteered to help us with Emily G. Godfrey.
And you know if she will plan to come at 9:30 or?
She said she'll be there at 9:30.
So we probably just need a couple of HRC volunteers to help with registration and posting.
So, Mike, why did we select 9:30? Because I'm pretty sure when I sent the updates last time, we have a room starting at 10.
Oh.
Or did I send 9? What did I
It was selected today at the meeting.
Okay,
Because
pretty
we
sure
were-
it's
You
10.
might want to circle back with Kyle and let him know.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we have the room
So-
at 10. There's not much that needs to happen.
Okay.
Outside of the I mean, and I use that room all the time for other events, it's set. So, myself and Kyle, Jeff is working on some of the things I talked to you about Kenya on AV things, and so.
So I can come and help set up.
So,
I think
mean,
he decided-
that's a plug and play kind of thing.
He decided 9 because we have some stuff that we need to haul from here over there.
So if you guys are meeting here at
So-
9:30, that makes sense, and if you guys are, I mean, you can come, but as far as I know, she told me I have the room at 10, and,
We have 1,000 place, what do you call them, centerpieces to set up.
1,000?
Well, 2 per table, and they're,
Okay.
you know,
So 30.
fine motor skill stuff.
So are you coming? Are you coming?
Not 1,000, 30.
It's like becoming different.
Same difference.
I'll be there at 10, yeah.
Okay. And Jeff is too also, okay. And then
So,
Tialo and Rebecca will also help
34.
at the front.
10 is the time, I should tell the other volunteer instead of 9:30.
So how are you doing with that? I kind of got lost.
I think we're okay on volunteers. Oh, and Marcy, right?
Yes.
All right. And then the third one is to, I think that folks saw that the registration email went back out earlier this week. And so tickets are going quick, but please resend if you have them to your contacts and let them know that we want to fill the room as much as possible and so that we can get folks there. So those are the 3 asks from that group this week.
Okay, great. CDC and HRTF, any feedback from the roundtable? I guess we wanted to leave a quick note for that.
Can I just say kudos to the team, you guys who put it on? It was great to be there. I was as far removed from that as possible, although I came in and was a listener, like, as we had talked about it, I knew it was about it, and I had been there for the planning. I know there are folks in the audience who were there, and so I don't know if there's a perspective that you guys would like to give just as we're using this time from an agenda perspective, but it was a cool event for me to be a part of as a commissioner. Any thoughts or anything that you guys want to offer?
I mean, just as a participant, I thought it was really great. I was totally pleased with like the sort of variety of people who were there, the variety of opinions, and just the openness to everyone's suggestions, and it was super informative for me.
Awesome.
Just to reiterate, the quality of people that were there and what they had to say, and the way you guys pulled it all together was great. And it's testament to Shabri and Kenya that 2 of the people from that group are here in this room tonight.
Right.
So, well done.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for
Yeah, and on that note, you are 2 people who are investigating the possibility of membership? No? You are?
I have applied.
You have applied, okay.
And I spoke with Kenya about my just ability, and she mentioned that special projects might be an opportunity, and so I
Great.
wanted to come tonight.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you guys for coming and spending all this time with us.
Thanks for having us, making it formal.
Any more about that event? Okay.
I thought but so we probably need to meet and try to figure out what's next.
Next steps, we'll be meeting, if anybody wants to be involved with those next steps, on HRTF or not, you're welcome to join us, let us know.
Is there a date where the results of the planks? Because I know that Alan is basically putting all the planks together in one document, and then will there be a meeting where, as a body, we discuss the planks and start to build the platform?
That's what she was.
That's the
what you
next
were just
step.
I
saying.
think we should, but we should plan
I'm
to
getting
do
calls,
something
people
at,
want to know when that's gonna happen.
yeah, let's go.
Oh, I see.
I think we should plan to preliminarily do something in January, even if it's not something final, just at this meeting, even if we just reiterate what came with the meeting, we can do that.
So you can tell them if they want to come in person and hear where we're at with it in January, yes.
Let's have a
and-
big report back in January, a big chunk of the agenda.
Okay.
Cool. And we'll see how far along we get. That way, I mean,
And, well, I'm gonna be in there too.
and yeah.
But the CDC, since this isn't a bit for them and CDC, should we also maybe set up some stuff for CDC? Because it's a committee that needs to still do stuff. Yes.
Sure, CDC can meet. Okay, nominating, anybody from nominating that has anything important to say?
You gave them-
So the nominating report is that Sam will try to hold interviews for the applicants that he's received to date within the next couple of weeks. So he'll be getting in touch with them via email or on the phone. That might be postponed because of his personal events that's occurring right now. So I don't know if someone else from membership can pick that up and follow through with getting the interviews done within the next couple of weeks, or what will happen. I would suggest that whoever else is nominating, talk with Sam and find out if we can move forward with that.
I'm gonna
Clear.
check with Sam Allen.
Yeah, I'll do that. I sent him an email actually about another thing that I didn't get back from today, so. but I'll
He was
ask.
driving down today
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Okay, clear, our main projects remains, I know your rights training, and we're in the roundtable, I think for both of us really consumed our time, so there hasn't been much action on that training, but we're still excited about it, I think, and,
There may be some things to work out still.
right. Well, one thing I noticed was that there was the Mental Health Association of Portland is doing a training, a Know Your Rights training with DVD and these really cool T-shirts. So we're gonna, we gotta dive into that and see what they're doing, because it doesn't make sense for us to duplicate, but I haven't had a chance to really see what they're up to. Anything else?
Is there training, what is that specific to, is it showing my rights in general, or is it?
I'm assuming it's Know Your Rights in general, you know, it did come from the Mental Health Association, but I wouldn't expect that they would keep it narrow.
Okay. And I would also like to share, just like with my work at the state OHA, where I guess the state is contracting with 3 African organizations around emergency preparedness for Ebola and getting the community, community awareness. So I'm kind of overseeing that process, but we're also, I kind of with somebody from the DOJ, so his name's Mr. Johnson, he's the head of the Civil Rights Unit, and he has an office in Portland. I actually met with him today, and so we're developing a Know Your Rights training specific to the African community around stigma and kind of how they're being treated in hospitals and clinics. So I don't know, that might be a point of collaboration.
Interesting.
But, and he's really, Mr. Johnson, I guess, he's really helpful in reaching out to areas to artists or something. I don't know, but yeah.
Great, thank you.
In a meeting at OEHR with COLC and the new Portlanders project or program, I talked about the Know Your Rights training and what you guys are doing. The question was, how is that different than what everybody else is doing? And what it sounded like is that because you guys are interested in creating a video to show examples of, hey, this is the way you can do it, or this is another way you can do it, that's what makes your plan or your project unique. And I think that there's still space for that sort of a piece, because people were really excited about being able to see people who potentially might look like them around their same age, showing you how one approach will yield a result and another approach will yield another result.
Okay.
So just to give you that information. And the office is still interested in, supporting that
Okay,
with Jeff in the video.
great. Okay, policy, nobody's here. HTTF, nobody's here.
However, I have a kind of an update for it because I think that I'm kind of the point person to keep it still a part of the commission. And there was a group at the youth forum that I went to that was talking about human trafficking. It's a youth group that started a nonprofit based out of St. Mary's High School, and I'm gonna get them in touch with the trafficking task force because I think that it would help both of them with each other's wins.
Excellent. CPRC?
I think the big thing is, I don't know much about it, I wish I knew more, but it sounds like it's really an exciting opportunity that Judge Demunis will be at the next CPRC meeting, which is Wednesday, December 17th, and it's going to be held at Urco's Africa House in East Portland. So we're moving our location from Kelly Building out to East Portland, either at Africa House or I think Urco. But on the 17th, Judge Demunis will be there to talk about his role in the COCL group that was selected out of Chicago. I don't know how Sam pulled that off, but I think it's a great opportunity for folks to, in a very intimate setting, get to have the opportunity to hear from Judge Demunis about his role, which I don't know much about.
So I'd love to add to that. So that links to the COCL decision.
Yeah.
And so as I was on the panel for the interview process and the selection process to recommend to this council, the COCL team that was chosen was the only team not going to be in Portland as a team, which is why they did not make the recommendation list, which was why it was so concerning that that was the same exact team that the city council chose. So what the Chicago team has done is teamed up with this local judge, and that's the communication from the city, which is this is where we're able to choose this team is because this gentleman is former Chief Justice is going to be local. So that's the background on that, which I think is helpful, and I think I'm hoping there'll be interesting questions for him in that context.
Yeah, so that's why I say I think it's a good opportunity for community folks to be able to express concerns that they might have to him, and so I don't know what Sam's plans are to publicize it, but like I said, I think it's a good opportunity.
And I would just say that, just for like record, HRC, and I think our thought and what we put into the letter specifically around the COCL had nothing to do with Judge Demunis and himself as a person. It was simply the COCL as a whole, which he is not. He's a part of the team, not being here in Portland, as a part of the issue. Not to mention, everyone said not them and you still chose them, so that's a part of it too. But, so Judge Demunis might be a fabulous person. I don't know him. I tried to research a bit about him, and he's been a pioneer in some different places, and so I appreciate him for that, and I think it's great that he'll be there. But yes, I think our stance, the letter that we specified, had nothing to do with Judge Demunis himself. But he looks like he'll be our local representative, so COCL kind of.
Okay, I think finally we have the notice from Diallo. So Diallo invited these people, I wasn't aware, I think I got a misunderstanding.
Yeah, it was my mistake. I could have probably communicated with you more so about it, but basically this is a group of people that have formed because of an issue going on where the city is selling our water to private developers, and so they wrote a letter, and I'm just going to read this because this is what they would have presented if they were here. There's only a page and a half with citations, a bunch of citations. So, okay. So, Human Rights Commissioners, my name is Johnny Dwork. I am an American citizen, a longtime Portland resident, a homeowner, and a taxpayer. As the son of a survivor of Nazi persecution, I feel particularly obligated to stand up for human rights. My associate, Rye, and I come to you today with a very serious human rights concern. Specifically, Portlanders are rapidly losing access to clean and affordable drinking water as a result of private industry's influence on our state and local governments. We will leave you with a properly footnoted copy of our testimony, which will include web links that will support every claim and concern we expressed today. On July 28, 2010, through Resolution 64-292, the United Nations General Assembly recognized the human right to water and sanitation and acknowledged that clean drinking water and sanitation are key factors in the accomplishment of all human rights. The motion was supported by 122 states and opposed by none. However, here in the US, and even here in Portland, we face an environment of crony capitalism that threatens this human right. We come to you today with evidence of a detailed plan guided by Oregon's Governor Kit Sauber, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation, and planned by a company called CH2M Hill to privatize and monopolize the entire public infrastructure of the West Coast via an instrument known as the West Coast Infrastructure Exchange. Their plan is to monopolize not just all the public water infrastructure, but also all our electric transmission lines, roads, hospitals, bridges, ports, schools. This plan is being implemented first and foremost by the capital capture of our public water system. Ominously, the board of directors in the West Coast Exchange simultaneously hold cabinet-level positions in the governor's offices in California, Oregon, and Washington. CH2M Hill is a privately held corporation and one of the largest engineering companies in the U.S. After serving as Portland's Water Bureau chief, a man named Joe Glicker, who is now a vice president at CH2M Hill, helped the EPA write the LT2 rule, which requires that all open air reservoirs in the U.S. should be replaced by underground reservoirs. This LT2 ruling was based on faulty science and is likely to be reversed by the EPA in 2016. By contrast to Portland's perfectly adequate, healthy, gravity-fed, above-ground reservoirs, reasoned science suggests that underground reservoirs bring increased risk of exposure to cancer-causing radon, nitrification, heavy metals, and toxic mold. However, in an obvious and egregious example of crony capitalism, Joe Glicker facilitated no-bid, no-cap contracts for the private companies he has worked for to replace Portland's healthy water system with these questionable underground reservoirs. CH2M Hill botched the design of our new Powell Butte underground reservoir, which suffered from 3,200 cracks and has been leaking hundreds and thousands of gallons per day. In the process of fixing these cracks, the protected Johnson Creek habitat was knowingly poisoned by the contractor 14 times with lethal levels of chlorine. These have not been isolated events. We alert you to CH2M Hill's criminal conduct and widespread fraudulence across the United States. Now imagine a situation like the one that recently unfolded in Detroit, in which citizens had their water services disconnected without warning. Further, imagine that those services were owned and operated by a privately owned for-profit corporation. If that were the case, citizens would have absolutely no recourse. Yet that is exactly what is being proposed right here in Portland, Oregon, and in turn the entire West Coast. Across the planet, there's a well-known documented history of privatization of public resources being a bad decision for humanity. While governments all across this planet have reclaimed water systems that had previously been privatized, a process called palletization. You guys can all have access to this too, if you guys want to read more. The cost and effort has been staggeringly high. Now this is the time to stop Portland's water from being privatized and poisoned. Accordingly, we ask you to further educate yourselves about this highly critical matter and join us in making sure that at the very least, the citizens of Portland will always have affordable and legal access to clean, healthy drinking water. So yeah, and this is a part of the, this I guess it stems from a conversation that I had, or a comment that I made at the last meeting that environmental issues are also human rights issues because we live in this environment and there is an inextricable link between us and what we eat, where we sleep, the water we drink. So, yeah.
Do you know, outside of presenting this letter to us and the specification as to all the points that he has A through K, I assume that them being here, they were gonna talk about action items around that or thoughts behind that. I thought he was making this aware, and so I'm concerned that they, I mean, I know they spoke with you and thought they had a time certain, and come here to find out they don't have a time certain, so we told them they needed to wait until a particular time. So I just wanna make certain that we connect with them both on actually either getting on an agenda or talking to people, because that was an unfortunate situation that they thought they were supposed to be here and then not.
Yeah, so I just started an email to him. We can pick it up from this. What happened is, I heard from you that you made the request, can we talk about this? I said, yeah, I put it on, I thought we could talk about it during emerging issues. Didn't know you were working with this other person. Yeah, it sounds like he thought he could present at 4, so.
And I don't know why he thought at 4.
Okay.
I said you probably have, 5 minutes to talk about it.
Okay.
And we'll be able to
Okay.
talk
So,
about it.
I'm happy to send him an email with an explanation of what happened. I'll let you see it first. So
It was my mistake.
I'm happy to take care of that part. In terms of what happens next, not sure.
Well, I don't know that we can ask ourselves that with him not being here. I think one of the things that we can do, however, is make certain that if there are requests for people to come, unless we're speaking to people and telling them that there's a time certain public comment, that there's a place and a time for them, so that there's not this mix up in time. I mean, if someone thinks they're gonna be speaking at 4, that's unfortunate, because that's.
And I didn't tell him at 4. I just said,
Yeah.
you should come to the commission and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, and I gave him the time and date, and then I asked Amy if we could talk about it too. So I guess I need to be more clear.
That's what I'm saying we should do now. I'm not saying it's on you or Amy, I'm just saying that we need to, just so it's easy for all of us, if we tell someone that this is the first time that people actually get to talk, it's at 5 or 5:20 or 5, whatever, 5:45.
Yeah, and a good process for that I've been doing is that they get a copy of the agenda so they can see it, and there's less confusion about when they're on or if they're on. So maybe you can get in touch with him and see if.
They mentioned to me prior to the meeting starting, because they got here at like 3:30.
Yeah.
They got here really early. And so while I was setting up the waiting, I asked them, so, they told me a little bit about the issue with the water, and then I asked them, what is your ask tonight of the HRC? And they said that, basically that the HRC demand or request that the mayor and the governor make a promise to not privatize our water sources. Now that's from me. I don't know if there is more to it, but that was kind of the basic response to my question of what is your ask?
Right. So it could be, Dale, if you could communicate with them and see is that your formal request, and then you were able to get a response back.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Any other emerging issues? Great. Thanks y'all for staying late.